Sure.
I'd like to call this meeting, the Clay County Commission, to order. We have one item on our agenda today, and that is the discussion item, the 2024 budget for law enforcement and parks funds that is presented by the administration. The only other item on the agenda is recess adjournment. So I think we can go ahead and get started if everybody's ready. Please proceed.
Good morning. Welcome to the second workshop for the 2024 proposed budget. As Commissioner Nolte mentioned, what funds that we are focusing on today are the law enforcement fund and the park fund. But just kind of take a back step, last week we met and spent about 4 hours going through the general fund, which covers a lot of services within the organization. There were a couple of follow-up questions and comments and requests that we had from the commission. One item was, I believe, from Commissioner Johnson regarding sales tax and how our actual sales tax related historically to what we budgeted for sales tax. That was a lot of data. We went back to pre-COVID because, you know, COVID has kind of changed our world and we're still not sure what the new normal is. So we did provide that to the commissioners in an email by year. And certainly if you have any questions about that information, please contact staff. The second question that came out of last week's workshop was from Commissioner Withington, who asked about a report with regard to going to our virtual servers and what does that savings look like. And so our IT department is working on all of that. Some of it is a little easier to put together when you're talking about hard numbers and savings. The other aspect that they're working on diligently is trying to anticipate and put together some what we would consider soft cost savings. And so that report will be coming to the commission, but it's certainly not ready for this week. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started this morning with the law enforcement fund is what we'll kick off with. So we'll follow the same typical process that we do. So we'll do a fund overview. We'll take a look just briefly at some of the miscellaneous law enforcement funds that are available to the sheriff's office. We'll hit budget highlights, additions. The sheriff will talk about their accomplishments this year, their goals, and be available to answer any questions about their budget. Once that's done, I'm sure we'll take a small break, and then we'll go into the park fund and basically follow the same process. We'll do a fund overview. We will talk about the park capital use tax fund and how those funds will be recommended to be used in 2024, and hit budget highlights and additions, and then certainly answer any questions, and then kind of review again the budget calendar going forward. So we're going to kick off, as I said, with the sheriff's office information. What you have on the screen is this is the sheriff's office organizational chart within the office of the sheriff. And so there are 226 full-time employees and 10 part-time employees in the 2024 budget. That represents 42% of the employees are within the sheriff's office for the county. And so we're going to just jump right into numbers. The law enforcement fund revenue projected for 2024 is a little over $28 million, 28.182. Now the pie chart on the left shows you the breakout of the type of revenues that generate the $28.1 million. And so what you'll see is the LEF stands for the law enforcement sales tax. That is a 1/8 cent sales tax. That generates about 19% of the operating revenues for the law enforcement fund. The next category is the general sales tax. There is a dedicated amount that is transferred to the law enforcement fund from the general sales tax. That represents 32% of the revenue. And then as we talked about last week in the general fund budget, there is a dollar amount that is budgeted in the general fund to transfer to the law enforcement fund on an as-needed basis. And that represents 36% of the revenue. We have a TIF transfer. This is one-time money, that 1%. We've talked about that, of the anticipated excess fund balance in TIF in 2023 that we're allocating to all the appropriate funds. We also have prisoner boarding that represents 4% of their income, and then there's miscellaneous income that comes in at 8%. So I want to talk a little bit about sales tax, right? So if you look at the general sales tax at 32%, the general fund transfer as needed at 36%, so that's telling you 68% of the law enforcement operating revenues comes from the general sales tax. When you add in the 19% for the law enforcement sales tax, 87% of the revenue to operate our law enforcement fund comes from sales tax. So again, we talk about economic environment and trying to forecast and being on a conservative approach with our revenue streams. It is very volatile when we get into sales tax. And so it's very important to recognize that is the main source of revenue for our public safety. The table on the right gives you a look of actual revenues to our estimated in '23 and our proposed in '24. So you see there the law enforcement sales tax is anticipated to go up to $5.4 million. The general sales tax, this is the direct transfer, has been pretty stable for the last several years at $8.9 million. And then you see the general fund transfer is 10.1. That is on an as-needed basis, and again, that's anticipated to go up. And then the prisoner boarding, we are recommending a proposed revenue of $1.1 million. You see in 2023, it's estimated at 1.6. So I want to talk a little bit about this one because it looks a little funky, right? So in 2021, you'll see that the actual revenues are down, and certainly in '22 are substantially down. So there's a couple of reasons for that. Historically, for the past 10 years, we averaged generally about $1.1 million in prisoner boarding revenue that we receive. In 2021, it was down. Primarily, we were in the height of COVID. And so really what we were not receiving and not having residents come from the state. So the state revenue was down in 2021. They weren't transferring their detainees, and we were not housing them. So 2021 was really in the height of COVID. In 2022, you'll see it's substantially down at $598,000, and that had to do with a timing issue. So we did not necessarily were as timely in our request to the state, nor was the state as timely in reimbursing us. And so our revenues were down in 2022 because we only record them as we actually receive them. Now, we have received those funds in 2023 of 1.6, because I know that probably doesn't make sense to all of us, and because we know we've had projects going on at the law enforcement center, and we've actually been housing externally our detainees. So what you see in 2023 is really the catch-up from the state of our 2022 revenues that we should have received. So it's kind of why our historical trend there looks a little different. And before I leave, I think there is a question by Commissioner Johnson.
Just real quick, because I need to talk into the mic.
Yeah, so we are, yeah. Mm-hmm.
By the way, I'm sorry, I cannot activate your microphone on screen. Okay, good. Okay. All right, I'll try to talk loud. So my question is, regarding the general sales tax, it said 22, 23, and proposed 24 are all the same. Why do those not change and the others do?
That has just been our historical practice where that's been our starting point, that we dedicate a certain amount, and that's sort of been the stable amount. The rest is, is
So that's
the
a transfer over then?
Then we
Okay.
and that's why you'll see the transfer goes from 7 to 10 million, is because we're leaving it in the general fund and
Right.
transferring it as
Okay.
needed. So certainly we budget as if we fund all of the needs of the sheriff's office, but we will then only transfer
Okay.
over what they need. So
Okay.
that's sort of the waterfall effect, right?
Okay.
So law enforcement sales tax statutorily goes into law enforcement. General sales tax, by ordinance that you pass when you adopt the budget, that automatically goes there. The general fund transfer, we transfer as needed.
Okay.
And I know you see the correspondence from the treasurer
Yeah.
saying we're transferring funds based upon a need that's the request from the auditor. And so he keeps a running total. If we start out with 10.1 each time that we transfer from the general fund, he tracks that to make sure, we're not going over what that authority is.
So when we talk about general sales tax and general fund transfer, they're both coming out of the same pot of money generally?
That's right.
So it doesn't really matter, those two lines? Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
By the way, my screen now is responsive, so I will be recognizing commissioners. I did have one question before I go to, I think it is Commissioner Lawson is next and Commissioner Wagner. What would be the amount that was short? In other words, the difference between the 2022 actuals on the prisoner boarding and the 2023 number, which is larger because of the timing issue. What would that have been had if you take the timing issue out and you even it out that way?
I don't have those numbers and exact numbers in front of me, but we can get those. So what you're asking me is how much in the 2023 estimated was really prior year? And what
Exactly.
did we really receive this year? We can certainly break that out.
And then the other part of that is, while we're in the process of doing some required maintenance at the detention facility, once those are done and we're back into sort of a normal operating area, it seems to me that from talking to other entities around the area, while we are not in great shape on the capacity, and we certainly want to expand that, we seem to be in the least bad shape as far as our ability to take in more prisoners. So from that point of view, as the other locals are in sort of tough shape, and as our position improves with the improvements on our facilities, would you anticipate that materially affecting the prisoner boarding revenues?
So when the sheriff's comes up, I'll have him probably talk more specifically about that. So I think the answer to that is, I don't know from a budget standpoint that we would change that number. And it's all going to depend, right? We know depending on the classification of detainees that we have, how many have to be isolated versus how many do we, basically transfer out ourselves. So we still have in the sheriff's budget funding for prisoner boarding expenses. So sort of a give and take. And so it's just how do you manage that and how do you help our other agencies around us and what we have available for. But again, historically over the past 10 years, so I would say we felt pretty comfortable with the 1.1 as a revenue. I would not increase that.
I might chime in if I could on the boarding question, just to answer your question now. So there was an initial receipt in this year, which was a reimbursement for 2022. It was $525,000. So of that 1.6 million received this year, or that we're estimating, 525,000 of that was, from 22 costs. So that kind of gives you a rough estimate of what that 2022 actual, should have been. So
that kind of evens it out, so to speak. It makes those numbers, just accounting for the timing difference, it really does rather make it a little bit more of a predictable and an expected.
Right. Again, that anomaly for us really, and is not changing, is 2021. And that really was the peak of COVID. And so, that world looked a lot different on dealing with detainees.
Thank you, Mr. Auditor. I kind of expected that would be the case, but I wanted to double check. Commissioner Lawson, and by the way, I would remind everybody speak into their microphones clearly so they can be heard properly. Please proceed.
Okay, the only question I had on the transfer from general fund, how does the 911 money that's going to now come into us from the mobile, how is that going to impact that? And will they need as much general transfer money? Because that's going to take away, as I understand, I may be wrong, I'm hardly ever wrong, but I could be wrong on this. If today, he has to worry about the salaries and the equipment and everything for the dispatch center. Now, some of that money that we're going to be getting after April is going to go to taking care of that. So that'll lessen his people and,
Correct. So again, if you recall, 2024, we're basically calling that a transition year because the 911 revenue, we will not see any of that until June. And
Okay.
because we really do not know what that's going to look like. So those proceeds from the 911 fund will go directly into the 911 fund. When we start having the opportunity to forecast and what do we think we'll at least receive in '24, we will be taking a look then about that transfer and what expenditures are currently in the sheriff's budget would then move over into the 911 fund. Specifically, dispatchers will actually, wages and benefits will move into the 911 fund going forward. But in '24, we still have 100% of it in the law enforcement fund. Again, not until we can kind of get an idea of what this really looks like going forward. So I would say to you, in the future, the general fund transfer to law enforcement fund will look different, and hopefully, won't be as great, because it will free up some revenue in the sheriff's office budget and the law enforcement fund, because dispatchers are going to the 911 fund. And that will leave the commission an opportunity then to look at those funds and possibly put those in roads, which I know has been a
I'm glad you remembered
priority.
to stay office.
Yeah. So again, I would just remind, we know that, and we'll be coming back to the commission, once the revenue is starting to be received, and again, remember, it comes to the state and then to us. So probably around, the end of the third quarter, first of the fourth
okay.
quarter, we'll be back to the commission saying, here's what we're seeing, and should we make any reallocations in the '24 budget, we will be back before the commission to talk about that before it happens.
Okay,
But,
thank you.
to make sure that we have funding for the dispatchers and that we have funding for our 911 system, we are funding sort of the old way
Yeah.
from a budget standpoint.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you, and the answer to these can be done by the sheriff in his presentation if it's better. But going back to the fun topic of the morning of prisoner boarding, just curious to understand, on average, how many prisoners do we expect, what that number generally represents, and what we charge the state for housing their inmates. And so, if you can, great. If he wants to
I
weigh
would
in.
defer to the sheriff, and if you hit your, there you go.
Good morning, Commissioners. Will Aiken, Sheriff of Clay County. To answer your question, there's really no way to project that. For the state, though, I think it's $57 a day for each inmate. The thing that hurts us the most when it comes to prisoner boarding is the fact that we have PREA, the Prison Rape Eradication Act, and the separation and classification of different inmates. And I'll use one particular inmate that we have in our custody at this moment. He's a 16-year-old child who has been certified as an adult. But there's too much gray area in the statute, and I still am forced to have to create sight and sound barriers for this certified adult. And so we're kind of working through that, but in order for me to house him under the current statute, I have to keep him away from everyone else. In order to do that, it takes up 30 beds to have one person in there, or 20 or 15 cells to have one person in there. So those are the challenges that we have to work with. Another thing is, and it's one of the things that we're going to be working on for 2024, is improving technology and attempting to encourage our judges to utilize WebEx to do writs instead of us having to go to DOC and pick up an inmate, bring them back to stand before the judge, and then they're remanded to our facility for 100 days instead of us taking them right back to DOC. They can take care of the entire process over WebEx. And so in order for us to do that, we just have to work with our circuit court clerk as well as the judges to say, okay, look, it's just a matter of changing your docket. I'm not asking for the world, I'm just asking for a little, flexibility to do these writs over WebEx instead of having to strain our staff to go to, to DOC, bringing them back. So going to prisoner boarding, if I don't have to bring back what we call red bands, your violent offenders, because we have to keep them separated from the rest of the general population, it would allow or free up more space. And so if our partners in adjacent counties need to board their inmates here, then we can actually accept them instead of us actually housing out because we don't have room for our own inmates.
Gotcha. Well, that leads to a few other questions, but I'll leave them behind for the moment. Very interesting. I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
By the way, one follow-up question to that, and that is, if I remember correctly, we were talking about what we charge the state. I think the state pretty much says what they will pay, is that correct?
Yes, so right now it's $59.54, and I believe the statute actually allows us to go up to, I think there's another, it's a higher amount. I want to say, and don't quote me on this, I think it's around $70. But in order for us to get to that $70 mark, the amount of inmates that or the amount that it would cost, I mean, it would be unreasonable. So we've had to do, especially with our municipalities, we've had to incrementally increase those changes so that way people can plan for it. But right now, we're at 5934.
I guess what I would, and this is a subject we will be taking up subsequently as we communicate our priorities to the state government. Perhaps one of the things that we should be including would be an increase to that per diem that the state allows, that minimum per diem might be something that we should consider. So perhaps if you could provide some recommendations or guidance on that, that might not be a bad thing going forward.
You know, the timing is interesting because the director of DOC is actually retiring this year. And I'll save, you know, many of the comments by sheriffs across the state on how happy they are. But I think it opens up an opportunity to kind of start a new way of doing things, and kind of leave the baggage behind. And so we're looking forward to what next year brings as far as the relationship with DOC and the sheriff's offices across the state.
And perhaps reaching out to the House Appropriations Committee on Public Safety might not be a bad place for us to be going as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Was there anyone else wanting to comment?
Question.
Go right ahead,
the
Commissioner
sheriff.
Lawson.
How receptive has the judicial been in accepting your offer?
Our judges are awesome. They're great to work with. You know, everyone is set in their, I mean, we are all set in our ways. And what I'm asking them to do is kind of change up the way they're doing things. And, you know, they've all been, you know, the information that we pass on to them, the requests, it's all been well received. They just have to figure out how they can manage their docket, especially when you have so many private attorneys, you have your public attorneys, and, you know, some people may be held up in another courtroom and can't make a certain time. So those are the things that we have to work through. But I'm pretty confident that in '24, we'll have everything lined out and we'll be able to do much more over WebEx and utilizing technology.
Great, that's awesome.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you, and again, this answer can come later. But I'm just looking at that prisoner boarding line item, and then looking at the next page, which is the expenditure side, and that's not called out. I would be really interested in understanding what that expenditure side pertaining to prisoner boarding looks like, for many of the same reasons that Commissioner Nolte has said. As far as asking for help and assistance, and I'll just say, when you tell me that for a 16-year-old we have got to remove the availability of so many other assets, it does get my attention, and certainly would like a better understanding of what that means on the opposite side, on the expenditure side, to really get a feel for the commitment we make to the state and how that affects us in actually running the operation. So again, doesn't necessarily have to have an answer today, but I am curious to know that. Thank you.
So thanks for the lead into the next chart that I just went to, which is the expenditures in the law enforcement fund. I will say that included in, I believe it's in the contractual, is I think we have allocated $500,000 to board out as an expenditure. I think we do have some historical data there, and we certainly can work with the sheriff's office to put a report to the commission on that. I would say that prior years, that expense has not been so great, but I think requirements have changed with regard to how we have to operate the detention facility. And as the sheriff mentioned, how we have to isolate now because of some changes in rulings, that while we have a historical trend, I'm not sure that that's what our future trend is going to look like based on that. So, but we can certainly do some information and get that to the commission for your information. But what we have on this slide shows you the allocation of the expenditures for the law enforcement fund of $28.1 million. And so you see the pie chart on the left that shows it by category. And again, almost 80% of the budget is personnel. And when you think about what the sheriff office does, it is done by people. And so that is our most major expense and investment in providing public safety to the citizens of Clay County. Contractual is about 16%, commodities is 4%, and then capital is less than 1%, but again, we also provide capital for the sheriff's office out of the capital use tax fund, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The table on the right, again, the same kind of format you've been seeing. So that shows you actual expenditures by category, are estimated for 2023 and are proposed in 2024. So you'll see that personnel is $22.5 million in the 24 budget compared to our estimated 23 of $19.5 million. So again, part of that is twofold on the increase in personnel. The first item compared to estimated and actual. So the first item is in the proposed budget includes raising the starting salaries for deputies from $50,000 to $55,000. It also funds for all sworn officers in the office of the sheriff, a $5,000 increase dealing with compression issues. That works out to be depending on what our current officers make, is anywhere from 5% increase or above. Also noted in the differences in 23, we've had some vacancies, and so again, our estimate is based on vacancy savings. However, I do want to reiterate, when we talk about vacancies and vacancy savings across the organization, it does look different in the sheriff's office because their operations are 24/7. And they have minimum staffing that they have to have on patrol and minimum staffing that they have to have in detention. So while they may have vacancy savings from a vacant position, those savings are also utilized in their overtime costs because they have to bring individuals back in on overtime to do what needs to be done. And so it does utilize some of that vacancy savings in the overtime. Many of our other departments, when we have vacancies and we're short-staffed, we don't backfill those positions because we don't have that minimum staffing requirement. So it looks a little bit different in this fund than in other funds. Contractual is up about to 4.4 from 3.3 estimated. We just talked about prisoner boarding is one. We still have some costs of changing over from our records management system, the existing system, to the new system. So we're standing up the new system, but we still have some carryover costs from our existing system that we need to have resources for during this transition period. There are costs associated with going through our accreditation program. Meal costs are going up for the detention facility. Certainly, as with all our departments, operating costs are going up. There's also an increase in employee training and development, and also building maintenance and insurance. So a lot of those things are sort of driving up our costs, including in our commodities. I would say that the 24 budget compared to the 23 budget is a 7% increase. You're not seeing budget numbers on this slide. You're seeing actuals and you're seeing estimate. Now, this slide will show you budget history, and I think this is an important slide to show because this is the Commission's commitment to public safety in Clay County. And so you see here budgets from 2020 to proposed 2024. As I said, between 23 and 24 is a 7% increase. If you look between 2020 and 2024, in 5 budget cycles, that's increasing the law enforcement fund by almost 38%. 37.5% increase. Again, the commitment to the Commission for Public Safety. Law enforcement has not just only the law enforcement fund, but we have other resources that are allocated. So what you see here in the list on the left are all the other sources of funds that are available. So we have the capital use tax fund, and then we have basically all the what we call the statutory funds that are available. So from the capital use tax fund all the way down to the sheriff's community engagement fund, that's an additional $2.9 million that is programmable by the sheriff's office. So the total law enforcement fund proposed in 2024 is $31.1 million. And so when we look at all of those funds and how they are allocated, you see then 72% of the $31 million is on personnel, 16% is on contractual, and then 5% on commodities, and 7% is in capital. With regard to the capital that's being funded, you may recall several weeks ago, we came to the Commission and asked to forward fund the vehicles in this year's budget. But also in 2024, there's some items, capital that has been requested primarily for the detention facility. A new oven, a new steam table, and washer and dryer. So, you know, those pieces of equipment, while they're commercial grade, take a lot of utilization. And so it's time to replace those pieces of equipment. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff Aiken to talk about his accomplishments, goals for 2024, and answer any questions that the commission may have about the budget.
All right, well, 2023 has been probably the most challenging year for me as sheriff because of so much that was happening. And one of the things that we've done, that we've embarked on, is a new CAD RMS system. So we went from an old, and I'll just say it, an antiquated RMS, records management system called Keystone, to an upgraded web-based system called Central Square. This transition has allowed us to connect directly with the cities like Excelsior Springs, Liberty, Kearney, police and fire departments, I have to add, as well as Gladstone. This transition also is allowing us to co-locate our dispatch services at Gladstone and really just kind of improve or beef up our capabilities when it comes to dispatch services. But it's also something that, you know, because of the working relationships between the municipalities and the sheriff's office, it allows us to be connected through the reporting system as well. So that improves our capabilities as far as investigations go. I mean, we still have the phone and we can still call our partners, but now we can actually access their reports to cross-reference to see what they've done with a particular case and to see how it's related to a case that we're working, and vice versa. And so those permissions are only allowed because of the great working partnerships that we have with those municipalities. And I will say that because of the way we've done things in Clay County, other areas around the region and beyond are actually looking at how we're doing it. So it's almost like we're, once again, tip of the spear in how we're looking at operations. The implementation of KeyTrack software. I knew we had a lot of keys. I didn't realize how many keys. When you think about, you know, facilities, we are a secure facility and we absolutely have to have key accountability. Well, before it was a key box in somebody's office where only 2 people had the key to that door to gain access, or we had another key box in our dispatch center where, you know, as the dispatchers are busy taking 911 calls, somebody can go in there, just take a key out of the box and then sign it out, and then poof, we never see the key again. And then we have to backtrack and we have to figure out what's going on. But typically it ends up with us, you know, losing a key, and then facilities having to change locks and just go through the whole process. Well, KeyTrack actually has biometrics built into it, so every key that we have in the sheriff's office will be accessible through this KeyTrack program, and it's a secure box. So when you go up to it, you type in a number, your fingerprint. I think one of the versions that we bought has a retinal scan. And then you, depending on what your rank is or your area of responsibility, it will allow you to have certain access to certain keys. So now when we talk about accountability, we have top of the line accountability, and that adds to the security of our facility. Another thing that we've embarked on is Guardian Tracker, what we're testing. So Guardian Tracker is what we call professional standards program. A lot of people like to refer to it as IA, Internal Affairs. And whenever you talk about IA, it's already has a negative connotation to that, right? You only go to IA or professional standards when you're under investigation and could potentially face termination or worse, criminal charges. But this program, this software, actually allows us to take it one step further. One, removing the whole negative connotation about professional standards, but then also adding the fact that our employees do great work, but we are terrible at capturing the great work they do, especially when it comes to an employee action report, or, you know, recognizing them when it comes to awards and recognition on a public platform. There was too many P's in those 2 words. So this software will actually notify supervisors and ask them, hey, where's your tracking of this employee's progress? Because historically, whenever you look at an employee assessment, you wait for a year, and then that year, that anniversary date comes up, and then you try to remember what has happened over the last 12 months. Typically, it's the last 30 days, and then, or one time they've messed up, and then that's your employee assessment, right? This actually tracks and notifies supervisors to make sure that they are actually tracking everything that is happening throughout that year, so when the anniversary date comes up, they have all of the information. So it's used for like an early warning system in case they are messing up, and perhaps the employee doesn't know they're messing up. But this will go to their supervisor and notify them and say, hey, look, this is what's happening. The program will actually pick up on trends and patterns and then notify the supervisor, and then it's just an easy follow-up, rather than waiting until the officer or the deputy fully messes up and now it's an investigation. We don't want to get there. You know, when we talk about recruiting, hiring, or retention, we don't have applicants lining up outside of our doors to work in law enforcement anymore. So we have to do what we can to value the employees that we currently have with us and make sure they're on the right path so we don't lose them. So I'm really excited about testing that software. Other agencies in the area are using it, and they've both had a very well-received response from the employees, because it's not just, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. It's like, oh wow, you're actually recognizing me for the job that I'm supposed to do, but how well I do it. Moving on to that, infrastructure. We've acquired and deployed license plate reader technology, and with that conversation, I have to stress, this has nothing to do with facial recognition. Okay, every time we talk about license plate reader technology, the first question that comes up is, how is it reading my face? You know, there's a lot of privacy issues and conversations that happen around license plate reading technology, but that is one thing that it does not do. But that also helps us, and if you recall, I've said in past presentations where Clay County is viewed as the Johnson County, Kansas of Missouri. There's this false perception that if you live in Clay County, you're rich and you have a lot of things to take. And, you know, although we have a little bit of violent crimes that happen, and typically we know who they are when it happens, we do see a large amount of property crimes, thefts of vehicles, large-scale shopliftings in the 152 corridor where all the big box stores are at. So we do see that, but this technology allows us to pick up trends. So when we do have a vehicle, we have to have probable cause when we use this to look for something. We can say a blue sedan with a crashed right front fender, and our LPRs will actually pick up on that vehicle. It will find it, but then it will also tell us if there is a pattern of another vehicle with them, because they don't operate just by themselves. And this has helped out tremendously when it comes to stolen vehicles, as well as stolen property and the 152 corridor and how hard they get hit. As an example, I was given a report that in the month of November alone, we picked up 7 suspects red-handed, but were also related to other thefts that have happened in the KC metro area. That's huge, and a lot of it is because of the LPR technology. For 2024, I'll just premise the goals for 2024. Every year that I've been in office, we've had a theme for the year. And our employees and everything that the Clay County Sheriff's Office has been involved with the last 3 years has been a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of change. The goal, or the theme for 2024 is really wrapping up loose ends. We have had so much going on that it's now time to conclude those projects and get prepared for 25. And I know we're not talking about 25, but that's how, we're always looking ahead. One of the things that we're looking ahead is we've already applied for a grant through the National Institute of Corrections to start the Strategic Inmate Management Program. So the way the Clay County Sheriff's Office has handled operations in our jail has been the same way with minor tweaks probably for the last 20, 25 years plus. Strategic inmate management, it challenges the status quo, and it challenges that old perception of what people are like when they come into our jail. Studies have come out and basically identifies that 95% of all inmates that come into a jail are law-abiding citizens who had a lapse of judgment. They just made a mistake. They made a bad decision, and now it lands them in jail. 5% belong in jail. So rather than treating everyone the same, now, there is a standard pre-trial versus post-trial, but instead of doing it the way we've always done it, there's a new way of doing things, and it adds a tremendous amount of dignity and respect in the way that they're treated when they enter our facility. We process them, and then we either keep them in our facility or we let them go. And what that will do, what it has shown in other facilities that has deployed SIM, Strategic Inmate Management, is it's reduced the amount of incidents that involve assaults on staff, and it streamlines operations to help process them very quickly. The reason why we're doing this now, and timing matters, is because we've embarked on Central Square, which allows us, one, to have a new jail management system, along with the records management system, but it streamlines how we book inmates into our facility, because now we have multiple municipalities all on the same system. So this is all a part of the master plan for the jail. And real quick, the 2023 theme was the year of the jail. There's a lot that's happened in the jail, and I'm glad 2023 is almost over. Employer of choice. So as you saw in the previous slide, I think it was, you saw a dramatic increase in the amount of support that the sheriff's office has had over the last, well, since 2020. And that's largely due to your priorities, and I'm extremely grateful for that and the partnership that we have with the commission. And moving into 2024, we're still going to look at salaries, but not, and just kind of give you a glimpse into 2024 into 2025. We are very, not marketable, we're there, in the market in the KC metro area. So now, instead of trying to fight our way up, we're there now. We're very competitive with other agencies. In 2024, what we don't know, and I had mentioned this in a previous commission meeting, is we don't know what our market amounts are for our non-sworn personnel. That is far more difficult for us to identify, and that's the reason why we're looking forward to a possible salary compensation study, and that'll help us out. But 2025, as long as the trend stays the way it is, we won't be asking for another salary increase for 25. And the reason for that is because we are short on personnel to manage our current operations. As an example, we found a document this year that was dated back in 1999 that basically identified, with the expansion of the second part of our jail, that we had to have 119 employees to manage operations 24 years ago. We're currently at 82. In the last 24 years, the county has grown by over 100,000 people. PREA has happened, 9/11 has happened, case law has happened. Case law, 16-year-old taking up an entire day room. And, okay, well, yeah, so to answer a question previously asked, we've lost approximately $60,000 so far in boarding revenue because of the 16-year-old that was just sent to us. So nonetheless, we need more personnel, but I mean, there's no way that I can ask the county commission or even the county administrator, hey, give me 37 more people to be where we're supposed to be at 24 years ago. So we are going to have to systematically approach that and try to find the best way possible. And lastly, the upgrade for technology in court services, allowing remote meetings, and then also assessing the detention facility and its needs. So this goes hand in hand. We'll continue to work with the judges to try to find the most streamlined way of working the dockets with the personnel that we have, but then also implementing the technology necessary inside of our facility to continue to encourage that new direction. We know that it's possible. We know that it works very streamlined because there are other counties adjacent to us who are already utilizing that technology. Now, but keep in mind, we are also the largest county in our area when it comes to personnel and inmates being housed in our facility. So there's a lot more to have to work with. So we're definitely on our way. So with that, I will open it up for any questions.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yeah. one question that has always boggled my mind is that, you know, while we get a lot of revenue when we house prisoners from outside, then in the same vein, we're paying out to house people that could be here somewhere else. So where is that fine line drawn, and why isn't it more advantageous to us to keep all our people here and then just do a few, you know, that we bring from the outside? Where's the break-even point, I guess?
Well, I'll go back to the year of the jail. 2023 has been the most challenging for us because of the multi-million-dollar upgrade that we did for our facility. In that upgrade, we had some challenges along the way, but we had to do a lot of construction in different day rooms. So, I mean, by default, we had no other space to move them. We were fortunate enough to be able to move some day rooms into other day rooms, you know, ease up on the classification process temporarily to be able to do the construction that was necessary in specific day rooms. But then there was construction that we just had no way of housing the people here and moving them around because of like the 16-year-old. So we've had to house them out. In '24, we don't suspect that we'll have to house very many prisoners or inmates at all. But in working with the county administrator, we still identified some funds there so that way we are prepared. Because in years past, we never had to use the line item that was funded for housing inmates out. This year caught us by surprise because of the construction. But I'm happy to report that the vendor who is finishing the project for our upgrade, they said that they're actually ahead of schedule. And so we're still looking at almost a 95% completion by Christmas. They will have to return in January to synchronize the boards, the intercoms, and the cameras. But when they're done with that, we are done with the construction project. So now we will have the space again to house our own inmates here and then open it up for other inmates from other counties.
Great. And you know, I just want to say, there's nobody that's been more supportive of law enforcement than I have, you know, because my husband being what he was for so long. But I totally admire the professionalism of your people, and they're all so intelligent speaking, always polite, always pleasant, but do their job great. The other day when the prosecutor came in, I think all of us dropped our teeth. He said that we'd had, 29 murders in Clay County, for God's sake. You know, you always thought this was the safest place in the world to live. So, getting more people out there on the street and, you know, having them available. Today, this was another shocker. I stopped to grab something at the Walmart down off of Shoto. And when you go in there, the shocker was, as you're walking down like makeup aisles and stuff like that, it's all locked. So if you want to grab a tube of mascara, you got to call, punch a button, and then finally they send somebody to unlock it because of the theft down there is so strong. It used to be a really safe area. I don't know, not be any longer. So I know the challenges you face, and while I feel it is my responsibility to monitor how money goes out of here, I think that you've done some amazing things, and, you know, keep doing what you're doing. We'll continue to support you, and hopefully this is going to be a record year for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. Well, I'll just say, I still think Clay County is a pretty safe place.
I agree with you.
Thank you. It's not without its challenges, but I think as we have experienced over the last several years, challenges are popping up all over the place, not just here. But to that point, I guess I'll make a statement because you've answered a couple of things of my colleague that helps me a great deal. But I would note that, and it's really true. But what I would note is as we look at that needs assessment for the detention facility, It strikes me that if 24 years ago it said we needed a facility that had 119 people running it, and today we're able to do it with 82, it does suggest that there are, as we look to the future and kind of the design of facility, that might invite a discussion of how many personnel do you really need to run a facility properly? And I certainly had this discussion with my last job, elected position, where we could not figure out how to get a new facility done, and now they're dealing with it today. But I do know from that time that there have been a number of changes in design that suggest the number of personnel that you need. So I just throw that out there to suggest that the facility that was envisioned 24 years ago doesn't necessarily have to be the facility of today that can still get the job done. So I just make mention of that.
You know, and to your point, I'll just add that there are things that have happened in the KC metro area that has questioned, like hands down questioned, the way we have run jail operations. And an example I'll use is Wyandotte County, Kansas, when their 2 deputies were killed just transferring an inmate to court.
Right.
Right? That changed the landscape of how we do jail operations now. And what we didn't have back in 1999 was transport responsibilities to the extent that we have today, as well as court security, because our courts continue to grow, and the threat to courts continues to grow. Excuse me. So yeah, they didn't have that back then, but you know, fortunately, we've got great partners surrounding Clay County, and we're having conversations about what the future of jail operations look like, jail facilities, and how to manage, you know, different facilities, because we want to be able to have a place where we can hold people accountable for their actions, but somebody who, you know, can't pay for their registration for their car because they're working 2 jobs and they're a single parent and they've got kids at home and there are more important things to pay for in their world, they can't be mixed up with the same person who's murdered someone.
Right.
And, you know, you mentioned we do have an increase in violent crime, but it's the classification piece that we have to be most mindful, because usually the ones that are responsible for violent crimes, they have enemies.
Right.
And we still have a responsibility to keep people protected while they're in jail and not just mix them up and then, you know, let the worst happen. So
Right.
we surely cannot allow that to happen. So that's some of those challenges
No,
too.
absolutely, I appreciate that. One last question, your comments on salary are very appreciated and very well taken. And I think we as a body are more than happy to put this office in a competitive position. And that's, I guess, where my question is. I take from your comments that even though we are where we need to be within this market, the availability or the pool of individuals for the job that we are offering, just broadly speaking, not just pertaining to Clay County, but broadly speaking, is not as robust as we would like for it to be. So I guess my first question is that a fair statement to make?
Absolutely.
And so how then does that drive your turnover and overtime issues? Because I won't bore you with what I was talking about last week, but that issue of vacancy is one that's very important to me as we just look at right-sizing our budget in its entirety, knowing full well that who you are looking for is very different than what we may be looking for in other departments, but just trying to understand that turnover, that churn that you're experiencing.
So thank you for that question, because I'd like to highlight that in the last 3 years, we've hired approximately 150 people. 150 people. As the county administrator mentioned earlier, we only have 226 with us right now. And I think the allotted positions that we have, I think we have 9 vacancies, but where we're hurting is we don't have a problem with vacancies and hiring people. We do have a problem with people who go on FMLA, military leave, vacation, who are sick, who are on admin leave. And on one day, I asked HR, how many people do we have out? Because I never thought about how people have things happen to them. And I was told 14 people, and I was like, oh my gosh, it never dawned on me, because when you have 14 people of your regular staff gone, you have to fill it in with overtime.
Right.
And I'm afraid that if we don't, and this is where the balance comes in. We're at, hopefully along, with your approval of the budget as we proposed, we'll be able to increase the starting salary, but at the same time, for moving into '25, if I keep working on the salary to stay competitive with other agencies but not think about personnel, then we're going to continue to burn out our current personnel, and those are the ones who are leaving us because there's too much overtime, and sometimes we have to mandate overtime. And therefore, we have employees who are working back-to-back 18-hour shifts. Not because they want to, it's because we absolutely have to, because we're a 24-hour operation. So I think we're now finally at that point where, with the amount of money that we're starting our employees off at, we value them, and I think in return, they see that. But now I think we have to focus on adding more positions to the sheriff's office operations, so that way we don't continue to burn out the ones that we have and then have to hire more people in, because I don't think we have a problem hiring people. And quite frankly, I think we're extremely fortunate compared to our partners around the region. We have the ability to hire people. It's just when we hire 6, or when we hire 4, 6 leave.
Yeah.
I'm just using those numbers as an example of this: take 1 step forward and then 2 steps back.
Right.
But we'll always have that rotation. But here's the part that I don't know how to answer. Let's say you give me 10 positions in '25. Am I going to be able to hire for those 10 positions?
Right.
We just never know. But I think with the amount of money that we have increased salaries to, it puts us in a better position. So that way, if that time comes to fill that many vacancies, we'll be able to hire them, because they're like, oh man, not only am I getting paid that much, I get to work for the Clay County Sheriff's Office. So, yeah.
Sorry, last one. Based on what you've just said, is there a break-even point by which, if I'm able to fill X amount, that probably relieves the issue related to burnout, extra overtime? And if you don't have an answer to that, that's fine, but just curious if there's an aspirational number that you're trying to get to.
Okay, in full disclosure, I'll just say I wish I had that number for you, because I think it's easier to work with a number than
Right.
to just try to say, well, next year we'll work for, 10. But I will say, without really digging into it, the 37 is a really good number, because when we look back at that document as it was written 24 years ago, it was done through a professional organization, through a consultant. And, we've tried to work around that, but, we've had other things added to the plate that they didn't take into consideration back then. And so, when we talk about the needs assessment for the sheriff's office moving into '24, I'm really hoping that consultant will be able to give us that number and say, hey, this is the aspirational number that you should be shooting for. And then that's now the direction that we can work. But I don't have that number for you.
And that's
It's
okay.
so hard.
In fact, just saying this may be something that we put on the plate of who we hire to look at that's helpful to know as well. So I appreciate those answers. Appreciate everyone's time letting
If
me
I
ask
could
those
interject on that one, because that's always a big challenge. There are some statistics out there, because, I appreciate you want to add more staff, and there's always this thought process, well, that'll reduce overtime and quality of life for our employees, and that's our goal. But when you add more staff, those staff members also get vacation, they also get sick leave, they're also away for training, they also have FMLA, they also have sick leave. And so now, while you've increased your budget and you have more manpower, or person power, doesn't necessarily mean that you're really going to see, from an operational standpoint, dollar for dollar savings.
I asked similar questions with firefighter overtime.
Oh, yeah.
The city, and had a very similar conversation, so I understand, absolutely.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, sir. Couple of questions. I got chicken scratch all over these things. First, your launch of Central Square. Just to confirm, Central Square is not just RMS's CAD also, right?
Correct.
That's a big deal.
Absolutely it is.
I've gone through in my career two revisions or actually complete changes of CAD RMS systems, and that's huge. So whoever your whoever your lead was on putting that together, please give them my condolences. That's a
You will
big deal.
definitely be invited to the award ceremony that we hold, especially in their honor because of how much
good.
work that they put
Yeah,
into it.
That's huge.
It
No
was
one's ever seen
demanding.
that before. That's just an incredible undertaking. That's your computer-aided dispatch system and your records management system, and that's the backbone of your police or fire or sheriff's department. That's huge. So congratulations on that. That's a big deal.
Thank you.
And that should go into some cost savings as well, being more efficient with that as well. So you answered one of the questions, and Commissioner Wagner brought it up, but if there's anything more you want to add to it. But I was going to ask you about hiring, retention, and vacancy issues, what hiring, retention, and vacancy issues you had. I think you addressed most of it. Is there anything else you want to add at all about those topics, whether that you haven't covered yet, or pretty much covered it?
I mean, pretty much in a nutshell, that's covered. You know, the key things that I'll point out is salary is always the thing that
Right.
young employees are looking for. They don't take into consideration the benefits, but when we can actually get them into the door and we can explain the benefits that come along with working for Clay County, it really opens up their eyes. And I think we have done a way better job in identifying the benefits that are through Clay County. And, you know, so it's just a matter of getting them in the door. The benefits are huge, but it's always the pay. It's the paycheck that they want to see right now for the younger employees. For the ones that have experience that come in who are willing to start back down at the bottom, they look at those benefits and they see how much better it is in Clay County than in surrounding areas. And that alone, they'll hang it up over there and they'll come to work for us. So that's huge. The salary and benefits are huge.
Yeah, well, and the third thing you talk about there is really the culture of the organization. And I want to commend you and your leadership over there, because it's really you and your top staff over there that create that culture. And you guys have quite a reputation. And to be able to retain the people that you had for so many years at such a low pay scale, I just got to say hats off to you guys, and I appreciate your leadership over there. But I cut you off. Was there anything else you want to say about that?
Well, thanks for saying that. I appreciate that because I'm not going to say, well, it's because of me that the Clay County Sheriff's Office is.
Well, I'll say it.
So I appreciate that. That's definitely nice. Thank you.
Dispatchers. So I know there was a struggle with dispatchers for a while. How are we with dispatchers as far as number of dispatchers, vacancies, dispatcher pay, that kind of stuff?
Man, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. We have 100% dispatchers.
Wow.
And we've made some changes and we've done some streamlining within our own internal structure. And we've added a communications manager.
Oh, perfect.
So not only do we have a communications manager, but all 8 of our positions are full.
So happy to hear that. That's
Yes.
good. That's not easy to do, by the way. And hopefully, like we said, after this year, this is a transition year, but in the coming year, we'll see that those 911 fees maybe help along that line as well. I had to laugh when you had to give the caveat about facial recognition for LPRs. It's funny because people are so concerned about that, but just about everybody that has one of these has facial recognition on it. But they're not worried about that, but I thought that was funny. You mentioned about some of the arrests that you made in recidivists, basically. You didn't use the word, but recidivists are a problem. It's a problem everywhere. These are repeat offenders, people that are career criminals. One of the things that I think is important, I actually just had a meeting yesterday with our county prosecutor and talked about the same idea. And I think everybody knows public safety is a big deal to me. And I think everything in our county is touched by public safety. From our schools to our businesses to our home, I mean, everything, to the perception of how safe we are. And I think it's important that we had, there's a saying that criminals and crime doesn't know boundaries. I want them to know boundaries. I want criminals to know, hey, you don't come to Clay County. And I think we already have a little bit of that reputation, but I want to keep pushing. As a matter of fact, the prosecutor just shared with me a story yesterday about how someone that was stopped in Clay County was kind of was pretty upset when he realized he was in Clay County because he knew he wasn't going to get away with it. Mm-hmm. That's what I like, and that kind of stuff gets out to recidivists. That kind of culture, that kind of reputation gets out to the recidivists, so they know, hey, you know what? Because there's people, let's face it, during the holidays, hey, this is the time. We're going to go to stores, we're going to steal purses from grocery carts, we're going to steal wallets, we're going to steal mascara from the makeup aisle, all that kind of stuff. There's people, that's what they do for a living. But if we have a public safety system in our county that doesn't mess around, that's fully funded and takes care of business, and we have that reputation, those recidivists will go other places. And that's really at the heart of what I'm looking for when it comes to public safety and funding public safety, not just the sheriff's office, but the prosecutor's office and anything else that's related to public safety, because I think that's so important. I think it's so important that we get that reputation and continue with that reputation. That, hey, this is Clay County. You don't get a play here. You don't get to commit your crimes here, and that the recidivists actually know that. Along the lines of recidivists, one of the things that I know I struggled with was, in retail store, they call it shrinkage. They just write off a certain amount of loss, and oftentimes they don't even, the majority of times, they don't even call the police. They'll find someone that stole the mascara. And they don't even bother calling the police or the sheriffs. Is that the case here in the county? Are most of our particularly like our Walmart or our Target, are they just writing this stuff off as shrinkage? Are they actually calling us and prosecuting, or do you have a handle on that at all?
I will say that over the years, we have had, and I'm not going to name stores, but to your point, the shrinkage, they would rather write off $1 million worth of theft than to have to get caught up in the legal system.
Right.
That has changed recently, and we have special teams. And it's not just the Clay County Sheriff's Office, but in collaboration with other municipalities that were really hitting the 152 corridor as an example and picking these individuals up, because now these stores want to prosecute.
Good.
I mean, the tides have changed, and so
Yes.
now we're starting to see a greater partnership with them.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that, because recidivists understand shrinkage. Recidivists understand, as you know, that there's some stores that just won't press charges. They'll just, hey, give us the stuff back, or just they'll let them walk out with it and just write it off. And so I think it's important to work with our retail stores, as you have been, obviously, and so I'm glad to hear that. You mentioned also about when it comes to retention, or I should say vacancies, FMLA, those kinds of things. We recently just passed, unanimously passed this 8-week leave for pregnancies. Was it 8 weeks we're given now, an additional
Yes.
8 weeks? 8 weeks.
I think we did 8 weeks, yeah.
8 weeks, additional 8 weeks.
Yeah. Paternity
So,
leave.
we've asked to have a report back at the end of this year, the end of the year, next year, to see what impact that had, but I'm actually really concerned about how that impacts you guys. And so I'd appreciate if you guys would track that and.
Absolutely, and I will say, to my knowledge right now, we have nobody that fits that bill.
Okay.
Unless, they haven't just notified us yet, but I also want to say thank you for doing that to the commissioners and for the county team for making that happen. One of the things I didn't talk about was our initiative, our 30 by 30 initiative that we've embarked on with the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And what that means is that we are aiming for 30% of our sworn staff to be female deputies by the year 2030. And it's not, there's a funny story, and I'll try to make this quick. Well, I brought all of our female deputies into our training room, and I told them, hey, this is what I want to do. And half of them were like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. The other half, if they had rotten tomatoes and cabbage, they would have thrown it at me, because they don't want to be treated differently. Our female deputies don't want to be treated differently because of their gender. But when I had a chance to explain to them that we just want to show value in you being in this line of work, these are the steps that we're taking. And the FMLA, the 8 weeks, fits right into that. We're doing things as far as construction. We're working with facilities management, working to build specific rooms for moms, right? If they decide to start a family or increase their family size, then you know what? We're not going to hold them to an old standard where, well, it's either the job or your family. We want to say, hey, we're here for you. Congratulations. Come back when you're ready. And then, by the way, when you're back, we've set up these specific areas for you to continue to do what you need to do in motherhood. And so, yeah, that's we'll definitely keep track of that. But it fits right into the 30.
Well, good.
30 by
I'm
30
glad to hear that,
initiative.
because I was admittedly very skeptical, although I voted for it, very skeptical about it, and still am somewhat skeptical, but Commissioner Thompson's the one that brought that to us and got that passed, so you get the kudos for that one. Yeah, he talked me into it. Okay, we talked about citizen, I want to talk about COLAs, cost of living adjustment, and actually your salaries that you mentioned here. So last year was a pretty significant, I think it's one of the biggest salary increases for the deputy sheriffs in a long time, maybe even the history. This year, it's another significant increase, depending on where you are, $5,000. So at the beginning, for an entry level, that's a 10% increase. And if you're making $100,000, that's a 5% increase. So that's good, and I really appreciate that being in the budget and that's going to happen, because I think we are, we keep talking about salary surveys, not for everybody. You're non-sworn, everybody in the county, that's very important. But we don't need a salary study to show us that we're behind. And it kind of goes to the same idea that you said, there's one study that said you need 119 bodies to operate that jail facility, and you're 37 short. Well, they probably knew back then they were short. We know now we're short. We don't need to wait for a study before we start hiring more. We don't need to wait for a study to let us know, hey, our employees are underpaid. We need to stay ahead of that curve and not wait for a salary study to come out. So I'm glad that we're still doing this, but my thought is we need to keep in mind that, that COLAs are going to everybody throughout the county, throughout the region, which means we're not done. We can't be done with public safety. We can't be done with raises for our sheriff's department, sworn or non-sworn, or our employees in general. But we played catch up for a while. We're getting closer there. We're probably, I don't know if we're even at the medium level yet or not. We're probably not even close to medium yet, but we're not at the very bottom, which is good. We were at the very bottom for a long time. And I just want to make sure that we don't get there. This year we're doing good. So just for years to come, I don't want to think, at least as long as I'm here, that I'm going to say, okay, we're done with the sheriff's department. We need to keep that momentum going and make sure that they're competitively paid. I think that's very important.
If I could interject about the.
Yes, ma'am.
The pay study, classification compensation study. So that will be, every position in the organization, including our sworn staff,
Right.
because we want to make sure
Yeah.
how that fits in. One of the things that will come to the commission is, part of that will be, what is your pay philosophy? What is your goal? Where do you want to be in the market? Do you want to be
Right.
at the midpoint? Do you want to be at the, 25th
Yeah.
percentile? So that will be part of it, that the commission will set that standard. And then part of the study will be saying, going forward, how do we look at that every year? How do we ensure that we are within the pay philosophy that the commission wants and that you have established for us? And so that'll be part of that entire package for sworn and non-sworn.
Right, and I agree with that. My only, I guess, having gone through a few of these, usually there's a study done when we realize we're so far out of whack, we need a study to tell us that we're out of whack.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when this study was done for the sheriff's department, said they need 119, they probably knew back then they were out of whack. But what happens, these studies come back often, they're so overwhelmed, it's like, okay, sheriff's department, you're 37 positions down for your jail. I don't know where we're gonna get there. And so sometimes these studies are just pushed to the side. It's like, we just can't get there. Where is the money going to come from for either 37 more bodies there, for the pay raise? So my point being is, I don't want to wait for a study to come back. I want to start tackling this now. One of the things I don't know if, I have a plan I want to talk to you in private about. Just some options that I want to talk about salaries in general. I don't want to throw it out there right now because it's expensive, but nonetheless, I think it's important that we stay ahead or try and push to get caught up sooner rather than later when it comes to salaries across the board for all of our employees. I have a note down here for the prosecutor's office.
And if
Can't
I
remember
could
that title.
interject, I would say that the sheriff is past his departure date for us. He has a commitment that I believe he has to be downtown. So I'm not trying to cut him off
Okay,
short.
actually, I know I
but-
was gonna say, it. My one last thing, I just want to get this out here publicly now. I said it when the prosecutor's here, I'll say it when the sheriff is here now, and I don't mean to embarrass the sheriff, and he didn't put me up to this, I'll tell you this, and I don't expect him to comment on this at all. But we have a sheriff and a county prosecutor whose salaries are tied to our Constitution, which I don't think are right. I don't think their salaries are right. Matter of fact, with our cost of living adjustment right now, this year, I wouldn't be surprised if the undersheriff makes more than the sheriff. We were able to add to COLAs to other elected officials that we have in this, the auditor, the assessor. We give them cost of living adjustments every year. We can't do that for the sheriff or the prosecutor. We have a sheriff right now who's got a PhD. He's a graduate from the FBI National Academy. He's got all sorts of experience, his military background, his leadership abilities, the stuff that he teaches, things that could get him more than double what he makes right now. You look at the salaries of other chiefs that don't even have to run a major county jail facility. A chief, I told him he could have applied for my old job and made 3 times 3 times what he makes right now. 3 times. We need to do something about that, and that's a Constitution thing that I don't think is right. I think we need to pay all of our employees, including the electeds, not us. I don't care about us. I'm talking about the electeds who actually really have a full-time job, that really work hard and have a lot of employees underneath them. And I think the prosecutor's office and the sheriff, the prosecutor and the sheriff are both 2 employees who both with doctorates, both with a lot of experience, who could make so much more. And I'm not talking about making them rich. I'm talking about getting a little bit more competitive pay, and that goes through our county constitution, which I hope to address that when that time comes, which isn't going to be this year, but in the time to come. So I just want to throw that out now, because that's something that's very important to me, and I think and it's not just for who's in those positions now. It's for the position. It's for the position. So anyways, I just want to throw that out, and I am done. Thank you.
I did want to add a few things, and I'll try to be brief because I know the sheriff does have other commitments. Something that I always try to bring up more often than not when we talk about transferring of inmates, and that is the incident you referred to where 2 officers lost their lives. And I'll keep saying this, and that is any way that we can help to safeguard those officers is something that we need to be going towards. I think people sometimes get tired of me bringing it up. My message to them is, I don't care. I'm going to keep bringing it up because it's far too dangerous. This is one of the more dangerous activities officers are involved in, and I think we need to pay attention to it. It was mentioned, and I know you put great value on that and great stock in that, but I felt it was important to underscore it and to make sure that the commission realizes and is reminded as often as possible that this is dangerous duty and that we need to be very focused on that. On the salary study, yeah, I think the administrator talked about developing what is the philosophy of this commission towards that, and we need to have that philosophy figured out because the next step is what will it take to achieve that dollar-wise, and so we need to make sure that our aspirations are in line with our budgetary realities. So I'm looking forward to that, and I do think we need to continue moving forward, but the salary study is important in my estimation because it tells us, it allows us to increase salaries in an educated and in a fair way. Absent something like that, I think we end up kind of shooting in the dark, and I think it would be easy for us to come off as valuing some of our employees more than others, and I think there has to be something we can point to and say, this is what we have gotten from the professionals. The last thing is we talked a little about property crime and your efforts to curb that, and it's more important than just somebody shoplifting a mascara, or even the gang shoplifters that work in this area professionally, and that is, in my estimation, I may be incorrect, but my guess is, as a non-law enforcement person, that violent crime follows property crime. If you allow property crime to go forward, violent crime will follow after. At least that's my thought. The reason I bring that up is over this past summer, there were 2 shooting incidences outside of my home. In one incident, the local police department actually inspected the front of my house for bullet holes. So, yeah, this is something I take seriously in general, but that obviously puts a bit of a personal spin on it. So I just wanted to make those points. And like I said, I wanted to hit them as quickly as possible so that you could make your commitments. We've got one other commissioner wishing to speak. If you want to address any of those, or if you just want to just acknowledge, yes, thank you, and we'll go on.
So if I can get out of here in 4 minutes, I'd be happy to entertain any other questions.
I can get questions, I can get answers from you later. That's good. Commissioner Lawson?
Yeah, just real quick. The one good thing whenever you come in is that I admire greatly the fact that you fight for your, I'm going to say department, but for your office. You fight so hard for your people to get decent salaries, good working, and I admire that. I wish that everybody that walked in here and had employees would fight just as hard. When I look through this budget, there are a number of departments I feel are very lacking in salaries. I really do. And I hope when the time comes, as much as we admire the sheriff and want to see things right for him, I hope we fight as hard for some of these other people that are not, I feel, getting a fair shake. I'd like to see that countywide. But as always, you know, I love you, and I think you do a great job. I know how dangerous it is. When my Jay was on the police department, we lost friends. I saw how devastating it was to the family, to the kids, the other officers, you know, to lose your buddy. And so I know it's not a fun job sometimes, but your people do it well and you direct them well. So, well, you know, I'm always happy to support you.
Thank you. Before I go, I just want to say thank you for your continued support. I mean, really, it's unwavering support for the Clay County Sheriff's Office, but I would be remiss by saying that we can't do it without all of our partners over here. I mean, they are so integrated into our operations that, you know, yes, I fight for my office, but I wish there was a way that I could continue to fight for everyone. And the reason for that is because when I go out and about, when I'm in Jeff City, when I'm in a different part of the state, I talk about Clay County. I try to represent Clay County the best that I can, not just the Clay County Sheriff's Office, because we're one team, one fight. So I definitely wanted to give thanks to everyone that's sitting over here in the corner for everything that they do and how they support us and then how you support us too. And to the county administrator, I think without her guidance in many areas, we would just continue to be doing things the way we've always done. And I have to admit that I am extremely impressed with the professionalism that she brings to this commission when she gives presentations like this. It makes so much more sense, and I don't feel like I have to go to Victor afterward and go, Victor, please explain this to me. So with that, thank you very much, and I look forward to continuing to see great things for Clay County. Thanks.
Administrator?
No, I just want to thank for the kind words, but certainly thank the sheriff because I know he had given me a stop deadline at 11, so we appreciate him, and I know he's got to rush to a commitment. So, and I'm sure, and yeah, really, and I'm sure, you know, if there are additional questions, certainly, you know, sheriff or I or the budget team would be happy to, you know, answer those questions. And we do have a follow-up question on the prisoner boarding, you know, experience and past and historical. And we'll work with the sheriff's office to get you a report on that, just so you have that information. So, any other questions? Because, you know, I'm going to defer them to Captain Agdarian if you have anything on the sheriff's office before. Doesn't sound like it? All right, great. Thanks, Amy. So we're going to then switch out of the law enforcement fund to the park fund. Would the board like to take a brief break before we move into the park fund?
That sounds like we have consensus on that one.
I saw some head nodding, so. How long would you like to take?
Is, 10 or 15 minutes good with everybody? It's enough to stretch our legs a
Yeah,
bit, so
10 minutes? Okay.
please, the 10
Great,
minutes
thank
would be
you.
great. Thank you.
And the reason for that is because, you know, Stacy will occasionally send me reference. And then if you're not sure,
Okay, we will go, we will now continue to pick up this meeting. And I believe where we left off was we were about to enter into the park fund part of the budget. So Administrator, please proceed.
Thank you very much. Yes, we will now do a sort of a deeper dive into the park fund. So this is the county organizational chart. What we've identified in blue are those operations, those functions that are within our park fund. And so those are the functions we're going to talk about today and go over the budget. There are 44 full-time employees assigned to our park fund. So it's basically about 8% of our employees are in our park fund operations. So we look at the park fund proposed budget. For 2024, the total authorization being requested is $7.8 million compared to, and you see the adopted budgets for 21, 22, and 23. So the proposed 24 budget compared to the 23 adopted budget is a 5% increase. Excuse me, what you see then is of that 7.8 authorization, 6.9 of it is the operating budget, and 876,000 is the reserves. So the operating budget from 24 to 23 goes up slightly, goes up 4%, and we're also working towards increasing reserves, which increases the reserves about 10%. This chart shows the revenue sources for the park fund. So the operating revenue is shown on the left in the pie chart. It is $4.9 million. So you see that the largest revenue stream for our park operations, the park fund, is fees. 51% of it comes from fees. These are individuals who use the park fund, park facilities, amenities, that's 51%. We also get 22, almost 23% of the revenue comes from leases. And then you see we have retail sales that we have. The park fund does receive a small allocation from the property tax, the surtax. That's about 8.1%. The general fund does, the general sales tax does have a dedicated amount that goes directly to the park fund that represents 9%. And then we have some miscellaneous revenue that's less than 1%. Now, the total resources that are available to the park fund in 2024 is the $7.8 million. And so you see those same revenues, and then you see that our reserves also represent 37% of the resources that are available for the park fund. This table will actually give you a comparison of trends of actual revenues, our major revenue sources for the park fund. So again, you see that general sales tax, which is the general allocation that goes directly into the park fund from the general sales tax. That has been the same stable amount for the last several years, $445,000. The property surtax, you'll see, goes up slightly in 24 actually goes down slightly in 2024 from 410 to we're estimating 400,000. Our fees in 2024 are proposed at 2.5 million. Now that is below our estimated in 2023 of 2.9. You also see the actuals there in 22 were 2.9 and 21 were 2.8. The reason why we're proposing a drop in fees, a couple reasons. Number one, 21 and 22, again, we will say those were COVID years. And, and so those are, we don't know if that's the new normal or not when it comes to participants using our services. The two major fees that we have reduced when doing a comparison in 24's proposed versus what we're seeing in our estimate is golf green fees and campground fees. Now, the reason is, again, you all have heard from me repeatedly, we are conservative in budgeting our revenues. And because green fees and campground fees are weather related, right? If it's too hot, if it's too rainy. And so we've basically strived to kind of look at trends. And while increasing it, it is slightly below what our estimated actual is for 2023. Our leases are up slightly, and then retail sales is about the same. So retail sales is fuel at the marina. It is selling firewood at the campgrounds. And some other minor things that we sell. So we look at the park fund proposed operating budget. So the operating budget is $6.9 million. And so the pie chart on the left will show you how is that broken out by categories. 48% of the park fund budget is personnel. Takes personnel to operate the marina, to mow the parkland, and do all the things that, trail maintenance that we provide for amenities in our parks. 35% of it is contractual and 17% of it is commodities. And so what you see in the table is actual expenditures for 2021 and 22, our estimated expenditures for 23, and what we're proposing in 2024. So I'm going to focus on those last two columns on the right, 23 estimated and 24 proposed. So personnel is up from estimated. Personnel is budgeted at $3.3 million. That's reflective of the same thing that we talk about when we talk about personnel across the organization. Fully fund every position all year long, no vacancies, and also does reflect the cost of living increase of 4%. Contractual is up from estimated 1.8 to 2.4. Couple of reasons that we'll see that. One is we are budgeting more for facilities and maintenance in our facilities in our parks, such as we're putting on new shingles on the log cabin at Ferris Farm. We're also doing some wood replacement on picnic tables. Also, it includes our merchandise purchases for resale. So again, what do we think fuel is going to cost us that we purchase for the marina to resell along with wood for the campers? We're also proposing to use a new application on the golf course greens, and so as a trial on that, and so there's a slight increase in our costs for that. So again, you see that proposed is 6.9, and again, it's really putting us back to sort of pre-COVID or COVID 2020. So 2020's actuals were 6.2. And so our 6.9 in 2024 budget, more in line with what we were seeing at that point in time. When we look at the park fund budget, there are a lot of divisions within the park fund. And so for those of you sort of with a terminology of project budgeting, so what we have tried to do is identify those facilities within our park fund and allocate the expenditures to those operations. We have done it in the past. I will say, though, starting last year, we've made more of an effort to truly look at expenditures, especially in utilities, and allocate the utilities to the exact location. So we're getting a better sense of what is the cost of operations for these different facilities that we have within our system. So, but you can see that the largest division budget within the park fund is operations, and it's about 41% of the 6.9 million. The second largest division budget is the golf course at 17%. It's followed then by benefits insurance for all of the employees within the park fund. Then it's followed by fee collection, which is an interesting title, but those are the salaries and costs associated with our staffing that work in the parks, that do campground leasing and items for resale. So it is staffing along with costs associated with that. You'll then see Camp Branch is about 6.4%, and Paradise Point. And so again, we're identifying James Farm, the bank, some of our smaller ones, whether it's the Ferris Farm, Mount Gilead, Claiborne, Plantation, all of those less than 1% of the total budget. And so again, we started reallocating expenditures to each one of those. Last year, we've learned from that. We've added some more. And again, just trying to make sure that we align our expenditures with the actual costs of operating these different facilities within our park system. In addition to the park fund and its revenues and expenditures, we also have the Park Capital Use Tax Fund. So just as a reminder for the commission, we have a use tax, which is internet sales tax, that equals 7/8 of 1%. It is allocated and divided by 3 different capital use tax funds. General, which is used for multiple departments across the organization, capital for road, and capital for parks. And so what you see here is proposed for '24 is $3.2 million. The operating budget in the Park Capital Use Tax Fund is 2.9. And then again, reserves are basically staying status quo in this particular fund of $232,000. So when we talk about the use tax, the 7/8% use tax that is allocated between the three funds, after the TIF transfer, 17% of that sales tax is going to the park fund. 38% of it is going to the capital use for road and bridge, and 38% of it is going into the capital general use tax. And we'll talk about those again when we get into the 5-year CIP and look at all of those. But I think it's important to know that the park fund proposed for 2024 is 17% of that use tax. And so the 3.2 million, again, more into the operating of 2.9 million for park capital use tax. How is it being spent? And on this chart, along with where's the revenue source. So the revenue source is, again, sales tax is 53.7% of it. We also have interest earning. There is a transfer in, again, that transfer in from the TIF fund, and then 43.7% is reserves in this particular park use tax fund. The expenditures for the 2.9 million are seen on the right-hand side. This is the only use tax fund that we actually have personnel costs associated with the capital fund. These are employees that we basically have our trail maintenance employees are paid out of the park capital use tax fund. 49% is contractual, 1% is commodities, and then 37% is designated as capital. So when we combine both of those, the Park Capital Use Tax Fund and the Park Fund, to get a total of $11 million in 2024 is proposed for our parks. 71% of that is from the Park Fund, and 29% of it is from the Capital Use Tax Fund. So when we combine them all, how are we spending the $11 million? Well, 34% of it is on personnel, 35% of it is on contractual, 11% is on commodities, 10% is capital, and then we have 10% that are basically in reserves. So I'm going to stop there and possibly talk just a little bit about what are some of the things that are in the line items. So first of all, in contractual, one coming out of the, especially out of the park capital, we moved a couple of years ago, is the debt service obligation for principal and interest on some outstanding bonds. One of the reasons that the expenses, the operating expenditures in the park sales tax, if you bear with me to go back here just a little bit, has gone down from 3.4 to 2.9 million. A lot of that driving that savings is because the debt service payment is going down, right? So it's getting closer to being paid off. So it's not that we're not doing as much in our park system, it's we're able to see the benefit of the debt service coming down. Also, you know, in this contractual amount is our lease to the Corps of Engineers and any permits that we have to have associated with our parks. In commodities, that's our nature center, our trails, we have a tree replacement program that's budgeted. And then in capital, 10%, certainly we're funding our equipment and replacement program, along with, you know, we're adding and recommending to replace a couple of pontoon boats for leasing. We have our vehicles that we're replacing and doing leases on. We have land and building improvements such as riprap at the lake, doing repairs and maintenance to our parking lots and our trails in the parks, and also continuing some programs that we had at the golf course with the cart path repairs and the bunker repairs, and those are both in phase 2 in 2024. We're also recommending doing some improvements to the fuel facilities at the marinas, and we have some roof replacements that we're also proposing in some of our capital facilities in the parks. Any questions on numbers? I'm going to then turn it over to Donna Coons and Carl Walters to talk about the accomplishments in 2023 and the proposed goals for 2024, and maybe answer any questions that you have specifically about items within the budget.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, sir. Just one quick question. If you can go back to the Park Fund Major Operating Revenue Source Trends. Boom. Just so I understand this, is this money that is generated by the parks?
Other than the general sales tax and the property tax, yes. So those fees, 2.5 million of that is all fees coming out of the park. So I will say to you that, and we'll see it a little later when we talk about forecasting, our parks fund, our parks operations are basically paid for by user fees
self-funded.
and leases and operations.
Yeah, because you take out those two taxes you just mentioned, you're still looking at over $4 million that
Yeah.
are brought in for
It
fees,
is-
leases, and retail sales.
Yeah, and let me jump to a number. So 82% of the revenues to operate all our parks come from fees,
Okay.
leases, and retail. Now, I'm taking that 82% of the combined 11 million, so
Right.
also the capital sales
Right.
tax, right? But 82% of it comes from people who use our services and our facilities in the parks.
So definitely the operating costs alone are more than covered. Yeah, that's good. That's good for the people to know. Thank you.
Commissioner Wagner?
Thank you. Let's see, let's go to the proposed operating expenditure slide and the personnel
This
line
one?
item. Yeah. So I get that we are proposing something that comes in line really with the actuals from 2020 and 2021, which is fine. I'd be curious to know what that position allocation looked like. And I guess I'm just going back to being the dog with a bone of trying to understand what a fully how all of our positions look when those positions are filled, and understanding turnover over time, because that is a pretty big jump between 23 estimated and 24 proposed. It's a big jump from 2022 actual to 24 proposed. So I'd just like to understand what that looks like, because I still maintain that I really don't want our budget to have dead money. It's probably not the right way of saying it, but that's the way I look at it. But understanding how organizationally we've looked in parks would be helpful to me to understand just how much gnawing I need to do on that bone or not. So, thank you.
Yeah, right, and you know, a lot has to do with our park budget is, you know, we also hire a seasonal, you know, temporary, you know, especially in the summer months for mowing. And as we all know, it all depends on, number one, weather, right? How much mowing we're doing. So, you know, in the years that I hate to say it's not had a lot of rain, that's helped us a lot when we've not been able to fully staff all the positions that we normally would like to fill in the summertime. Sure. You know, so we look for creative ways of how do we manage it because of the vacancies that we have. And we see those savings because we're, again, as we talked about earlier this morning, we're not backfilling those positions. We're not asking our staff really to do a lot of overtime unless, you know, we just need to and the weeds are completely out of control and we need to mow.
Right, you know, is that an issue where you trade that personnel line for a contractual line? Is that, I mean, that thinking could be
And
there
we have
as
done that
well.
also.
Yeah.
When we've not been able to get staff, then, you know, then we'll look to other, you know, companies to help us with that and what do
Absolutely.
they mow, right? Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, appreciate it.
Any other questions? See none.
All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Donna and Carl.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Donna Kuntz, Deputy County Administrator. You know, I'm sorry our sheriff has left the room, but I think we should start, since we're following law enforcement today, that as representatives of the Parks Department, that we want to thank the Sheriff's Department because they are the deputies that respond, they patrol our campgrounds. They help with special events, and they're out there directing traffic when we're doing marathons and things. And so I think we'd be remiss if we didn't start by saying thank you, because they are a great partner to us as well, and we appreciate them mentioning us. A few of the accomplishments that we had in 2023, is we have started relooking at our rental boats. We have both fishing boats and pontoon boats, and we were able to upgrade two of our fishing boats, and we have just recently gotten in two of the pontoon boats that was placed on order. We have upgraded our fairway motors, a side-by-side, and a Vera cutter over at our golf course facility. We have training. We always want to invest in training in our staff, and we're very fortunate that we have one of our employees that is a welder, and he conducted a in-house welding training class. With the amount of mowers and types of equipment we have, this is a needed skill set, and it was something that we could do in-house and help train others, and so we greatly appreciate that staff member for his knowledge and being willing to share and be a teacher for us. We have, in general, mower replacements going throughout the parks of Jesse James Farm, our eastern parks, and all of our other areas. We've also tried to pay a lot of attention to our infrastructure this year. We have worked on the parking lots. We have gotten the James Farm parking lot resurfaced this year. We did an asphalt overlay, at Camp Branch and Crows Creek. We have a new maintenance building that we added onto an existing structure, but this now allows us to put more equipment inside, protection and longer usage and protection of that equipment out there. We are constantly doing riprap and shoreline replacement to control erosion. So this is an ongoing project for us, but still it is much needed funding, and it's something that we have to do each year. We are getting close to wrapping up a water line study that was, we were able to use some ARPA funding for this year. The water line study tells us whether we can find alternative ways of getting water to our campgrounds and to our shower houses. The current water line that we have runs under the lake. It is an original water line to the facility. It breaks, it requires divers, it's expensive. So we're in the final stages of that, just waiting to hear back from the engineers of the number 9 Public Water Supply District. Once we get their input and to know what flowage rates that they could provide to us, the engineers will be able to complete and give us a report as to what that study says and what our alternatives are and better ways for us to perhaps take care of our infrastructure going forward. We have ongoing tree restoration, and we receive, very fortunately, we've been receiving a grant each year that we use recycled tire materials to replace park benches and picnic tables, which are scattered throughout the parks. And then we've also been upgrading our CXT restrooms to nicer facilities. We were able to put one in the Crows Creek Campground at B Loop, and we've gotten 4 new ones out at Rocky Hollow Park. And those were a few of our highlights of some of the accomplishments we were able to do. Some of our goals for 2024 is to continue on with upgrading our boats, those in particular our pontoon boats. Those are leased out on holiday weekends. They are all gone. It's one of those things you need to reserve in advance, because if you want to use it on a holiday weekend, you better get your name on the list and plan for it early. We have a parks naturalist on staff. We just hired a new one in November to add to our staff, but we're also going to continue on expanding that program in 2024 with our new staff that we've been able to bring on. We will be continuing with our tree restoration project. We have been in discussions with you on the KCTA project. That is coming back up in another week. So we're still looking into what we can do for the KCTA cleanup, and that's one of our projects we'd like to work on in 2024. Our county administrator has already mentioned that we are going to do upgrades to our 2 marina fuel pump systems. And then we have, moving on, we have more shoreline stabilization over at the golf course on Posse Hole number 5. There are plans for the bunker renovation projects out there at the golf course. And we are continuing on with the golf cart path restoration projects. And we have a drainage program that we'd like to get funded and take care of some issues out at the golf course. And those are just a few of our planned goals for 2024, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, the only thing I guess I'm a little gray on, and I apologize, maybe I dozed off or something. But, so today, we're saying that the parks completely fund themselves. The money coming in is sufficient to cover the expenses.
There are just, and bear with me as I go
Okay.
back to this slide. So this is the revenue stream for the park fund. And so 2.5 million are for fees, leases. So the leases would be boat slip leases, KCATA lease. Those are leases, the golf course lease. And fees are going to be green fees and cart fees, campground fees, leasing space there. And then we do retail sales, right? So that is the fuel at the marina for boats. It is, we sell firewood to campers. And we have some other minor miscellaneous things that we sell at that. So yes, the bulk of the revenue, other than this small allocation from the general sales tax of $445,000 and the $400,000 that comes from the surtax, property surtax. All of the rest of it is basically self-supporting revenue to come in to operate our parks.
So the other day when we bought a couple of fishing boats, we were just approving the transfer of the funds or the purchase. That wasn't coming out of general.
That would have come out of this fund. That would have come out of the Park Capital Use Tax Fund,
Okay, okay.
right? So again, going back to the Capital Use Tax Fund is our operating of 2.9. So that is that internet sales tax where 17% of the total goes to the park fund. Now, that does pay for employees. So our trail maintenance crew is paid out of this fund. And then capital for the parks. So many of the things that Jonna just mentioned, the pontoon boats and some of the other things are paid from here. Now, I will say in the park fund, the previous one, we do have lease payments for some of their equipment that comes out of that fund. So they use both. But any funding for our parks that is not generated from the parks are those two property taxes that I just mentioned and a share of the use tax that we use for the trail maintenance crews and capital.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, thank you. Pontoon boats, how many pontoon boats do we have? Do you know? 10?
You need to put your mic-
And have we increased those, or we always had 10? Well, I mean, when I say, have we always? In the last few years, are we increasing those at all, or just replacing the ones that are worn out? Do we know? Okay, and then the replacements, are we on a regular for those 10? Are we on a regular replacement schedule, like, 2 a year, 3 a year, or is it just as soon as, when they're worn out, we replace them?
Here lately, it has been that they have not been on a continual replacement program. That's part of the reason that we've invested in the fleet the last 2 years is because we've waited until they were basically not operational.
Right.
So the county in the past has deferred. We've deferred maintenance on our buildings and the parks. We've deferred on our equipment. And so we're trying to play catch up, but one of the goals that we have, while we've talked about the 5-year capital improvement plan, right, for 5 years for projects and equipment, we are also going to be working on a true countywide equipment replacement schedule. And that means 20 years out, or
Yeah.
whatever the life expectancy, and that would include our boats, our trucks, our mowers. And so that is something that we are continuing to develop.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
we
good.
have a regular schedule.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Obviously, you knew that. I think that's a good idea. So still on the pontoon boats. I love those pontoon boats, by the way. I use them myself. But those are seasonal, right? Those, we don't use those year-round? Or do we? We don't run them year-round, do we? So even being seasonal, he's shaking his head no. So even being seasonal, do you know if those operate in the red or the black nose? The cost of the boat and maintenance and the slip, everything, are we making money off that, or is it still operating in the red with those boats? Do we know?
I don't have that exact number. I can tell you from 2022, we brought in $88,230 in rental boat fees for 2022. Right now, we're sitting at 114,000 and some change. That's, that's from September's last record that I have.
So wait, so the $114,000
Yeah.
is at what period of time?
That's till September.
So that's one season then?
Yeah, pretty close.
So we're making over $100,000 then. And then, so how much does a pontoon boat cost?
Last two I bought are 45,000 apiece.
Okay, so that's at least two pontoon boats that we can get from that money, so, and if, as long as we're not replacing two pontoon boats every year, yeah.
So
So-
I could interject
Go ahead,
a
yeah, you know where I'm
little
going.
bit. So we're going to get to a later slide where we're going to talk about the forecasting of the park fund. And so, yes, we need to do a deeper dive, and so you will see that, and I will say to you, because we are fee-based to operate our parks, we need to ensure and do a cost-benefit analysis and ensure that our fees that we're charging keep pace with what it costs us to operate those.
Well, and to that point, if we can actually make money off that,
Yep.
and would the market allow us to purchase even more pontoon boats to make even more money? In other words, would a fleet of 15 be even better than a fleet of 10? At some point, there's a break on our return where it's not worth it.
Right.
But I'm just wondering if we looked into that, you know, if the market's there, and people want it, like you said, sometimes you gotta reserve them in advance. You know, so the demand is there at least sometimes, but I don't know if it's there for the whole season, and if it is, you know, if we could still generate more money and provide more pontoon boats for more people, I think that'd be great. Obviously, if it keeps us, if we stay in the black with it. So something I think we should
Yeah.
look into.
You will hear me say a lot, and Commissioner Wagner and I have had this discussion, making data-driven decisions. And so it is about doing the analysis, because should you stay in a program, should you get out of a program? Should you expand the program? And so there are a lot of things. And so we have not done as detailed on those type of things, but those are things that are in the works, especially as we look at, you know, planning out equipment replacement schedule. Well, again, that's part of the analysis of should we be adding to the fleet, or if it's not, and it's not covering its costs, or you said contributing, should we stay in it, or do we need to just raise the fees? And so what is the market? What will the market drive? So all of that needs to be taken in. This is probably, of any of our operations, is ran more like a business than anything else that we do, right?
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. Well, my fellow pontoon aficionado over here has taken many of my questions, so I will just leave it as, to kind of jump off of that last point you've made, and just the suggestion that, you know, to me, this sort of operation, although not an enterprise fund, in many respects should run like an enterprise fund, to kind of treat it more as the business unit it really is, which may capture a little bit of the earlier comments our colleague made about, you know, what's going into the department and how is it being run. So I'll just leave it as, you know, it's hard to budget a non-enterprise fund as an enterprise fund, and I would recognize that, but it just seems to me all these questions that we're throwing out there, the data points that are available to us, really suggests that this operation can run that way. I generally would make the argument about golf courses in the same way, but I think that requires then how especially how we maintain that operation over time and how it probably is not kind of thrown in with everything else, but, so I'll just kind of leave it at that. I think you know where I'm going with that, and I'll just leave it with that.
Yeah, so it is again, these are assets, and how do you invest in those to ensure that they are still viable assets and provide a benefit to our citizens and visitors to the lake area. I would say, yes, I'm certainly, enterprise fund, I would say this is more of a special revenue fund. That really it is, we are trying to operate this with its dedicated revenue from its operations, more so. And you brought up the golf course, and I know that's been a comment that we've received about, well, the golf course, is costing us money. I would say, in 2022, the revenues from the golf course were $1,060,000. And our expenditures were $753,000. So we substantially made money off the golf course. Year-to-date right now, because it's been a great year, and, golfers they're a group of diehard golfers out there. Unless there's snow on the ground and you can't find the tee, they're out there. And so we're blessed with revenue because of the weather. But 1.2, almost $1.3 million year-to-date. And our expenses right now, year-to-date, have been about $653,000. So I would say that the golf course, and again, we get money as part of the agreement. We get a percentage of the green fees. We get a percentage of the cart rentals. We also then get a lease fee from the individual who is managing the golf course. So those are three revenue streams that come directly from that. And there are many tournaments that are held out at the golf course, and we've got repeated compliments, not only about how it's managed, which is to the third party, but also compliments to our staff, because we do the maintenance on those courses. Maintain the greens, mow the greens, do whatever you do to the greens, applications. And so we get tremendous amount of compliments on the condition of the greens. And so that is, I would say that has been one of our successful aspects out at Smithville Lake, is the golf course.
Well, I appreciate you diving into that a little bit more, and I guess where I'll just leave it is, certainly in an annual budget, you're not going to get into the weeds in both of those operations, but it just seems to me that when we view them, whether they are as special funds, enterprise fund, whatever the case may be, I think it is looking at them in such a way as to how do both of those have the opportunity for revenue generation. What sort of additives do we need to bring into either operation that allows it the opportunity to gain more? So, I sometimes use the term the goose that lays the golden eggs. I want them both to lay more golden eggs. How can we put them in the position to do that? And I think part of that is just how we look at them in our budgeting. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Now, I do want to clarify, those numbers that I gave you when expenditures are more the operating expenditures, right? Because we've been moved to try and track those. So we still have projects coming out of the Park Capital Use Tax Fund, such as the bunker replacement, the cart path. So, there are assets there that, also, and that we have to invest in to maintain that. And as Donna had mentioned, there were years that the county did defer maintenance. So we're seeing some major projects that we are doing right now to plan to play catch up. But how do we have that in going forward so we can smooth those projects out? But definitely, I think it is commendable to our staff and our third parties that are out there that the park operations are as sustainable as they are from their own revenue stream.
I just want to say that, yes, there is an awful big hill to climb back from on deferred maintenance. It wasn't that many years ago when out at the docks, there was an area that it felt like it was permanently roped off because the dock had broken. You could see the fish in there, you could see the water. So, I want to commend everybody involved, because we are coming back from something of a low point, and it takes time and it takes money, and I think that both of those have been wisely allocated by everyone involved to make sure that we do come back from that rather low point. The other thing, and then I'll go to Commissioner Lawson, is I really like this discussion we're having right now regarding the golf course, because it's easy to say government should be run like a business. I've had often on my own businesses since '78. Government doesn't run like a business. Government is different. However, business principles do need to be applied. And I like the nuanced discussion we're having in that there are areas of government where those principles can be applied in a more direct manner, in a more of a manner that parallels what does happen in private business. So I think while we're looking at return on investment and other concepts when we're talking about this, I think it's good to understand that there are areas where it applies, more logically than in others.
And I would like to interject because, government agencies, whether it's counties or cities, have these type of facilities and programs all across the country. And it really is set by the governing body is, what is your goal for cost recovery? There are agencies there across the country that, their tax dollars subsidize membership into a community center and so, I would say the discussion at the commission level since I've been here, that's not a discussion that we have had, but it looks like our historical trend is we are trying to have our park operations as sustainable from their own revenue source as possible. And I think unless we hear otherwise from the commission, that's the direction that we're going to continue to move in, but still wanting to make sure that the items that we have are within the market and certainly affordable to residents. So we don't want to price ourselves out of the market, and we want our citizens to be able to use these amenities. And so we also take that into consideration of how do we balance that.
And like I say, that's why these discussions are so, I think, appropriate and helpful, because it is a chance for the commission to communicate to the staff and other members of the government what it is we're looking for and how we can apply those principles. Commissioner Lawson, I believe you were seeking recognition.
I was. I will say that we've used the services up there. We used to ride up there all the time, use the horse trails. We go up and use pontoon boats. And we used to go to the golf course all the time. When I worked for the phone company, we had a lot of tournaments up there and always done highly professional. Everything we've had interaction in the past few years with the park department has been exemplary. So I will say that. One of the things, you were mentioning a lot of things. You get about $4,000 some quarterly from the trapper range, correct? Okay. And the other thing, how's the restaurant doing? When you look at, I know we blew a lot of money on that restaurant, but that was in the past. Now, are you seeing, is there a lease? I think we approved the lease. Are we seeing then that now it's more profitable with the new folks?
I'm going to turn that over to Donna and let her talk a little bit about the restaurant.
So the restaurant depends on, who's the vendor. We had Burley's Deli in this past year. We had a very hot summer. We had an early wet spring. And so they did not feel like they made as much revenue as they were counting on, because it was also their first year. It's a startup year. So they are not going to be returning to us next year. So we will be going out to a bid. One of the things that she said she would have done different if they decided to stay was probably more bands, because the previous restaurant vendor had done several bands, but they were concentrating more on establishing and wanting to do their pizza truck, and they were really focusing more on their food and stuff rather than entertainment. They thought that would become later. But it was really not a great season at various times to be at the lake.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a very hot, droughty summer.
Do we do a multiple, I don't remember how that lease was. Was it a multi-year lease?
No, the lease can be canceled at any time by either party, the county or the other party with notice. And it is a percentage of sales. That is what we receive, is a percentage of the sales. But there's other things that go along with it, like they pay a portion of utilities that they use. They pay for trash service to dispose of all of the paper goods. So there is expense because the vendor must cover their operational costs in the regards to trash, grease removal, and various, and basically it's the electricity.
And typically, I believe your question was, when we do go out to bid and issue a lease to a vendor, is it multiple year?
Yeah.
And typically, we do a multiple year, with options to renew. But as written in all our contracts, we allow either party, the county or the vendor, with a proper notice to say that they would prefer to cancel. And so we have been given that notice.
Well, and that's probably wise, because if we get a bad person out there and we want to dump them, then, we've got the ability to do that early on.
It works
Yeah.
both ways,
And absolutely,
advantageous to both.
yeah.
We want to
In
be
this
fair to the
instance,
vendor. Right.
These folks don't make a profit, why in the heck be out there? But I will say that when they did have the bands out there, we went out often, and it was packed to the gills. But then that's another expense that they've got to look at, and if it's lousy weather, nobody's going to come. So, okay, well, that was something I wondered about that restaurant. The other thing I want to ask about, the employees' salaries this time, is it just their cost of living that they're going to get and nothing else?
For the park fund, yes, there's 4% right now for 2024, and then they'll be part of the salary survey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just, I know how, when I go up there, everybody's always working. You always see somebody cutting grass, you see them cleaning stuff up, they're always busy, busy, busy.
Yeah.
You go to get on the boat or pontoon, whatever, at least you can walk, like you said. You don't have to worry about going around a hole that you're gonna fall through or something. I just feel like, why aren't we doing a little bit more for them than just your cost of living? I just,
Trust me, I would love to do more for everybody across this organization. But again, if we adjust the parks, which I don't disagree with you, that our maintenance probably need an adjustment, and the salary survey will show that. But then I need to go look at facilities, because they too need a raise.
I
And then-
agree. I agree with that.
And I would agree with you, but then we are, as I think Commissioner Nolte said, to some degree, without the study and where we should be for those positions, we're shooting in the dark. So yes, I believe the 4% is appropriate with what has happened with the economy, and that we really do the pay study and determine where should we be for various positions with the market and internal equity.
well, I don't know that I agree with that 100%. We can, and I apologize, I'm not being difficult, but I'm speaking as I feel. We just sat here with the sheriff, and while I realize the kids working, cutting grass, don't have the same fear of life that a deputy has, but we were willing to make concession and say, you betcha, we're gonna raise that. Now, I'm sorry, but there's probably a hell of a lot of expense in this budget, a lot of fat that we can do without, that will allow us to give these people a little bit more of a raise. That's why we can't keep help. That's a cold, hard fact. Whether it's out at the road and bridge people, whether it's at the park department or our staff in the building. I think that we need to relook at this, cut out some fat somewhere else, and I'm not saying make them all make $100,000 a year, but give them more than 4%. I think that's pretty chintzy when you really think about it. So anyway, that's just my thought. I don't know how anybody else feels, but we've got such tremendous staff. I can't say it enough how impressed that I am with the people we have. The little girl that works, they're taller than me, little girl that works for the collector, gosh darn, that little redheaded gal that sat on our 190 staff, yeah. Good gosh, that little gal is so damn smart. She She can see a situation, and right away, she tells you, you better not do this because of this. She's a kid, and she's sharp as a tack. And you have those kinds of people in every single darn department. And I just,
We
we
do.
lose them because
do.
we don't incent them.
Well, and
So-
that's one of the things, you know, when we do the study, which is more than just looking at salary and benefits, but what is the process and what is the evaluation? Because historically, what this county has done is, it's a blanket raise for everybody, right? Doesn't allow you the opportunity to value your rock stars. So we have employees that come in every day, do a great job. We have employees that come in every day that go far and above what their job is in serving this community.
Yep.
Yet our system is set up that we don't get to recognize them financially. And so my goal would be, as we work through whatever the pay plan looks like going forward, we have that opportunity to make that available to provide rewards for performance.
Well, and you're right, you're right. You gotta do this in baby steps. But Donna, I would ask you, if, now, she works with these, you're at the park, aren't you? You're park as well as facilities.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I don't have golf course, but yes, I have parks.
Okay, so here is how I look at it. The sheriff can sit there and say to us, I'm gonna hire these many people, or I have this person on staff that is exemplary and blah, 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 whatever he's done outstanding, or she. And he can say, I'm raising that guy's salary another, $200 a year or whatever it might be. But he's able to go through there. So I ask you, Donna, you look at this with all of your employees that are out there at the parks. If you had the capability and we had the money, could you go through here and say, Mary ought to get this much more, Fred should get this much more, this guy ain't worth a damn, we'll keep him where he is? Do you have the capability in your mind to be able to do that?
The only time that department heads really have that latitude to do it is at various times if you're trying, and particularly it comes into play when you're trying to hire a new person. Sometimes in order to bring in a new person and to be competitive in the market right now, because we don't have that compensation study, you need to be able to give them that $1 more. But then you do have to look at what's the impact on your existing employees. And what happens then is that we have to make a decision to bite the bullet and decide, well, in order to make it an equitable arrangement and fill this position, I'm going to give up, maybe I have some part-time money for winter-type services, and you go back in and you look at that line item and you redistribute it, and you don't have the ability then to bring in part-time help, perhaps at a time when you would use it, just to be equitable. So it really comes down to that market study. And I do three
know
different
that.
departments, and so I have to be, when I look at what am I paying a maintenance person here in Liberty, what am I paying a maintenance person at Parks, what am I paying a maintenance person at Airport, the jobs are similar, and I need to be able to pay them equitably, because what we wind up is we have people that jump from department, I used to be at facilities, but I can make 75 cents more at highway, so I'm gonna be good at highway.
Sure.
So we recycle employees, but not in a good way.
Okay.
And again, some of those things that she just mentioned are all out of different funds.
Sure,
Right?
I
So
realize that.
trying to
Yeah.
ensure that we have internal equity, which is really what she's talking about.
Sure.
And I would say right now we don't.
Yeah.
And it's happened over the years, which is why it's so important to step back and look at the entire structure.
Well, I'll tell you this. I want to know, and I don't know about anybody else, but I want to know at the end of next year, how many people did we lose because we didn't pay them properly or whatever other reason it might be? And then, it'd be a darn shame for us to lose some valuable individuals because we didn't pay them a few dollars more this year, and we're waiting for that $250,000 study to be able to then look at it equitably and give people what they really deserve. I'm sorry, but I don't get it, and I'm afraid you can't convince me that she's not smart enough, I know she is, to go through there and at least look at some people that need to be incented a little bit more, give those people a little bit more money so we hang on to the good ones, and if the bad ones go away, go with God. But at least we maintain some kind of a good staff over above what we've got now. Anyway, that's just my
And
2.5 cents.
I agree wholeheartedly in a pay-for-performance plan, which is really what you're describing, right? If, you know, this particular employee, again, exemplary. But I will tell you, and we have the HR director in the room, really to create that structure, to be fair, you need to start at the beginning of the year, sit down with each employee and say, here's my expectations, right? So here's what you need to do. And so then you're telling them, okay, this is what, but if you go above and beyond that, then then you're eligible. So it's, again, based on performance. But in fairness to employees, to do that without any kind of, explanation and expectations on performance, it's a little unfair.
We don't do an appraisal
We
on
do.
every.
We do.
Okay, so then you've got your appraisal, you know that Johnny is perfect, and Mary is a piece of whatever, and she doesn't do anything. Then you incent that man, and that's what I'm saying. If you've got the appraisals, remember in the real world, that's how I got raises. If I was good, they gave me more money. That's all I was there working for, was the money.
Right.
So,
But our current system is the raises and the salary adjustment is not tied to your evaluation.
that is unbelievable.
And that's the way it's been for years.
Unbelievable.
I agree that's why we want to change the system.
Well, why aren't we changing it right now? I'm sorry, but come on. We were able to change procedures and things of that nature. Do the stuff the same damn way and that's not your fault, you haven't been here long enough. But do the same damn thing, the same way we've done it for 105 years. Let's get off our dead butts and do it the right way. And if you have a great appraisal, you ought to get more money. And there's no reason why we can't do that for our staff. And then if we can't have some kind of event or something of that nature that we have to forget about, there's other things we can cut. I know there are things we can cut, and this year, every time one of them comes up, I'm gonna say, that's something we should have cut to give the employees money. I'm fighting for these guys because nobody else is fighting for them or can fight for them. I just think this is if you get a great appraisal, why the hell aren't you getting more money?
And I would tag on to that great appraisal. To be a fair and equitable appraisal, you need to make sure that your managers are trained so that they do deliver fair and equitable evaluations. And so, to your comment about we should do it and we should do it right, that's exactly where we are. We agree with you. We should do it, but we want to do it the right way.
Well, let me ask a question. Carl, how long do you work for the county as a supervisor?
Turn on the mic.
Supervisor, probably 12 years.
Donna, how long you?
14.
I rest my case. I mean, Jesus Christ, if they can't, excuse me, Lord, if they can't sit down and look at a list of people and evaluate someone, I know both of them can do it. I know our HR gal can do it. I know all of the department heads can do it. I know that I'll lay you money that little Mr. Victor does his appraisals and gives his people money accordingly. So, yeah, I think that these people, if they're over the department, then damn it, they should be saying, now maybe we can't give them everything we want to give them, but they should be able to take their appraisals and say, $2 more an hour, $1 more, 50 cents, blah, blah, blah. I know they're all intelligent enough to do that. And if they aren't, they shouldn't be in the damn job. So all I'm saying is, they should be making that decision, and then we should sit here and say, oh, damn, she's right, we've got to get these people paid this amount of money. And where can we cut the budget to make it happen? That, I don't see. You can't convince me that it shouldn't be that way now with seasoned supervisors that ought to be able to say who gets what.
And we can certainly do that with the number that it is. That's, in essence, even for a pay for performance, it is a department, you get X percentage. You get a pot of money and you allocate it to the employees based on performance. We can do that now with the 4%,
But
or whatever percent we end up with. But,
Well, so
yeah.
if a person isn't, by law, and I don't know what the law is, but by law, if I've got 5 employees and 2 of them aren't worth too much and 3 of them are exemplary, do I give those people the 4% and these 2 don't get that 4% raise? Is that legal to do?
You must justify why someone is not getting a raise on their performance.
Yeah. So if they can do that, why can't they say another 50 cents extra here or another $1 there? I feel like we ought to look at it. I know we're into the budget, but every one of us up here has a responsibility to make sure that this is done and done properly. We did it for the sheriff, which I'm all for, you know that, but I think that it should be done the same way for everybody else. These guys should sit down with their appraisals, ratings. They don't have to re-interview the people or anything. They've got the document. Sit down with that document and say, I would love to see this person, because of performance, and everything was a 1, being the high, and I'd like to get them another $1 an hour.
Well,
Or-
again, we can do that currently, but it will be a change because, again, our practice has been each position in this organization it's budgeted. So, it goes straight down and it says, this is what they are, and if we do a 4% COLA, then that's how much is allowed to that line item. Certainly, we can say to a department, here's your increase. Here's currently what everybody makes, and here's the total. Here's whatever pot of money you get. Now, you can go and we can create a spreadsheet, which is what I've done in the past, and said, you can make this work, but you have to live within these dollars that you get.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that can be done.
I don't know how everybody else up here feels, and I wish they'd say it. Don't make me be the bad or the good guy. I want you to voice your opinion if you think that that's the way it ought to be. That's, in the real world, that's the way it is. So why should we be different?
I might comment. I mean.
Go ahead and identify yourself for the recordings, please.
You're on.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, sorry. Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. I might point out, I hear your, concerns, Commissioner. I think I just might point out that it's not necessarily the case that only in elected offices do you see merit raises. In appointed offices, there are merit raises all the time. They happen throughout, just about every day, honestly. So, those happen by identifying a vacant position or another position to adjust existing budget. So it could be called out as well in addition to that, but I just want to clarify that it's not the case that there have never been raises in unelected departments.
It simply just depends on if they have funding in their personnel budget. And I think, as you heard Donna mention, if there's somebody that we want to hire, and again, we only have so much for that position, but if you have it in another line item in your personnel, they move it up and that's what they hire. So there is flexibility currently. It's just, I would like to see it broaden.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying about the study, because if that, it seems whether I like it or I don't, the consensus is that really it needs to be done by our department heads as well as our office holders. So consequently, if we're going to do it, that's great, but I think that we need to start now and not lose key staff that we could lose. But not only that, it's not just the fact that we want to hang on to them. If they're really good, for heaven's sakes, we need to be able to incent them and make them feel like they're a human being and that we value them enough to do that. So anyway, that's my idea. I may be very wrong, I'm hardly ever wrong, but I just think that it would be a smart thing if we could look into it and see. All these department heads are smart as a whip. Look at that little Kit back there, that guy's sharp. I know that he'd like to do some changes on some things. I don't know that, but I say he would. So anyway, that's all my thought, and I'd like to see that before we go forward anymore. Give them the opportunity. If they don't do it, they don't do it, you know? But they can do what they want to do, but I feel they need to have the latitude to do it.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly, and, you know, I would say Kim Callahan and I have had the discussion since I walked in the door about how do we change and transition to a pay-for-performance. I'll also say that it's very rare, you know, and again, I go back to training managers on how to do that, and communicating and expectations to employees, because that's very critical and fair, because we want to be fair, we want to be equitable, we want to be able to recognize all our employees appropriately. I will also say that it's not typically the norm that everybody on my team, you know, performs at the same rate. And so you want to make sure your managers, you know, have the ability to understand how am I going to, and it's hard. It is hard when you work side by side and supervise employees to then make differences between individuals. It is hard.
And I know that because I have managed people.
Yeah.
And I know that, frankly, I'll be honest with you, other than the appraisals I received from my superior, nobody ever sat down and say, here's how you fill out how you evaluate it.
Yeah, training is
You knew
key.
there were standards, and they know that there's standards, and they know these are the 5 tasks that guy should be doing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna rate him in each one of those. How he
Yeah.
treats other people, how he works with other people, how he treats the customer, if you will. And then you affix an evaluation to it. They are smart enough to do that, I know that. And then just, if everybody's a 1, give them something. If everybody's a 5, don't give them a damn thing. So it's just, you know, I don't, and I think it would be wise to give them some training if that's what they need and want. But I think for right now, I feel like they can wing it. I just know in my heart they can. So, anyway, I'm done.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. So Commissioner Lawson just opened up a can. And I was going to talk about this in private with you, but since she opened that door, I'm going to walk right through it. If you happen to take heart medication, Danny, you might want to take extra right now because I'm about to be ready to give you a heart attack on this. But a couple things I want to say. First of all, you know, when we ask questions of elected officials like the sheriff or Mr. Hurlbert, it's different than asking questions of a department head, and we can't expect the same answers. The sheriff doesn't answer to us. He answers to the people, and he's guaranteed his job until his next election. All the department heads answer to her, and we're not their boss, so some things have to be filtered through her or discussed with her. So I don't think we're going to get the same answers, or should we be asking the same questions of department heads in a public setting as we would as a sheriff and expect the same response. Having said that, I understand the frustration that Commissioner Lawson has, and we particularly talk about pay for performance. But I worked for a city where we went through actually a whole transition to performance-based budgeting and looked at pay per performance. It was a complete disaster. Pay per performance, in my opinion, works much better in the public sector. I'm sorry, in the private sector than it does in the public sector, just because there's more flexibility in the private sector. Bonuses, for example, we can't give bonuses. You can give bonuses in the private sector. There's a lot of things you can do. And right now, when you look at our pay scale, you know, we want to give, you know, pay some people more. Well, because we pay so little already, the max that we can pay is probably what everybody at the lowest level probably deserves anyway. So it's hard to make that difference. And a pay per performance is extremely, extremely complicated. We want to think in our minds it's a very objective system. It's not. It's very subjective, and you have, in other words, the department head isn't the one who decides all these. There's several levels of supervisors who are doing these evaluations. So you talked about training. All these supervisors have to be trained on how to do these not only evaluations, but now you add pay for performance in there. It's like, well, how do we apply this pay for performance? And that's why you see a lot of times in governments, and I'm sure it's happened here, is you'll have people, we want to give them more money, we don't have more money to give them, so we'll give them a different job title so we can give them more money. And then that messes up the whole system in general as well. And so then a salary study really helps fix a lot of that. Really helps delve down to the details. And even if we wanted to go to a pay for performance, you need a salary study to do that. And that's why it's so darn expensive. We talked about that last week. But there's a lot of details to it. And I don't know if I'm a big proponent of pay for performance in the public sector with the limited budget that we have. But I am a proponent of more pay for our employees, period. And whether or not we can get to a pay for performance or not, I don't care to have that discussion right now. What I care to have, and this is one I was going to talk to you in private about, but because I didn't want to
So
throw
when
it
the
out in
heart
public.
attack is coming?
Yeah, this is where the heart attack is coming.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about a 4% raise, and I think a 1% pay raise across the board for everybody is about $350,000, something like that is the numbers you gave. It could be a little $360,000, something like that. I'm just gonna round it out to about $350,000, roughly. I would like to see more than a 4%. I would like to see a 5%, which is gonna be under $350,000, but a 5% across the board for employees. 6% is even better, but now you're talking, $700,000. I don't know how to get there, and that's why I wanted to talk with you about if there's a way to get there, and I'm not asking for an answer now, but just something you could think about. If there's a way to get to another 1% for our employees, whether it's the beginning of the year or it's halfway through the year, we do another 1.5%, 2% after we see what our revenues look like halfway through the year so that we're not putting ourselves out too much. But if there's something we can do to get more than that 4%, and this is why. We talked about a salary study. I don't believe that anybody in our salary study, when we have the salary study, I don't think any salary study is going to come back and say, you're overpaying your employees.
No, I
Our
don't.
employees are overpaid. I just don't see that ever happening. And so since it's not going to be that they're overpaid, what's probably going to be is some of them are grossly underpaid, some more than others, to the point where it's going to be tough to catch up. And to catch up, we're going to increment this year after year. Well, some of these people are going to retire before we ever catch up. And so my thought is we need to start the catch up now, and if we can. And again, there's two sides of the ledger. I get that. And this is where I give her the heart attack, because she's got to figure out the two sides of the ledger. And like I know it's easy for elected to say, hey, give us more money, let's spend more money here, spend more money. It's got to come from somewhere. Let's reduce taxes and spend more money. That doesn't always work. But if there's a way we can figure out another 1%, 2%, whatever it is, whether it's the beginning of this budget, halfway through the budget year, that's just something I'd like to explore.
Sure. Well, and I appreciate you letting me know that now.
Yeah.
If that's what the commission's desire is, because, we have still several weeks to go through additional budget workshops. So, if that is the commission's goal to look at a 1% to 2% additional, whether we can do it in January or again, it may be after we really get closer to the, we don't really close our books, I think, to probably mid-February. We really want to know, what is that carryover?
Yeah.
What does it look like?
Right.
And again, we're pretty conservative on revenues, I would
Right.
say that. But again, we're driven by the economy, so, keep reading things in the paper about, what's happening with the economy. So let me run some
Okay.
things and look at some ideas and
And I will say, I certainly don't speak for the commission. I've not had a single conversation by any commissioner about this. I was actually going to have it with you first.
well, I would love
just
to
to
do
see
that. If the commission would support it, we'll look for ways that we can look for something.
Yeah, and if we can't, we can't, but that's certainly where we want to, and that's the reason why. I think we're far enough behind now that any salary study is going to show that we're far behind, and we're going to be too far to catch up in any reasonable, so might as well start that now. And it might mean some tough decisions in our budget, but I like to look at it. If the rest of the commission wants to at least have you look at it.
And maybe, so I'm gonna, maybe a compromise between the two is 4% is status quo, right? Because we've always said employees know about that already, right? They
Right.
watch these meetings, they know 4% is being proposed. So 4% would be to everybody, and if we could do additional 1% or 2%, maybe that's the pot of money that is given to managers and supervisors to make some decisions about, flexibility on increasing some wages, if that's, or they could
See,
divide it
I'd
up
hate to
with
go down
everybody.
that route now because there's so much involved in that kind of process.
There is.
With the evaluations and the training, that kind of stuff. I'm not against going there eventually. I don't think we're there this year. and I'd prefer just to see across the board. Again, I hesitate even saying this because I don't want the employees to think that, hey, we're voting for a 5% or pay raise or anything. That's not, so that's why I want to talk to you prior about it. So I want to make sure that's clear to their employees. Hey, that doesn't mean we're going to a 5% or anything. Right now, there's a 4% on the budget, and I'm the only one who's actually bringing this up right now. So I don't even know if the rest of the commission even wants to even consider this. And I don't know that it's feasible. I don't know that I want to either. That's why I want you to help look at the numbers and maybe Victor, see what we can do between revenues and our expenses, and if there's something we could do either beginning of the year, halfway through the year, something that we could do that's just going to, an overall increase across the board, cost of living adjustment is all I'm looking for. And if we want to go down the road of pay per performance, you know.
And I can appreciate it, because it does, to have a true pay-for-performance system, it is a culture change.
Right.
It doesn't happen overnight, and it does take a lot of work to get there, to be fair. But I think the rewards, but you typically do not see it in public safety.
Right.
Public safety is usually not based on, it's
Right.
usually a structured step-type program.
Right.
But in all other areas, usually, can be very successful, but it does take time to make it very successful.
And the other issue I have is once some places have transitioned to pay for performance, they haven't been able to uphold that. And they fall away from that very quickly. And that's the other concern I have about going to pay for performance. I'm all about giving our employees more pay. I don't know if that's the right way to do it.
Well, and I would love it, the other alternative, and you mentioned, and some states do allow it, is they are allowed to give in sort of bonuses or
Right.
incentive. So, which is a great opportunity,
Yeah.
because you're not then compounding it. So you had a
Right.
great year, Commissioner Wagner, I'm gonna give you, $200, right?
Right.
It doesn't go on your base salary, but you are known that what you have done this year is greatly appreciated, besides what, same raise everybody else got. So there are advantages to doing that. Unfortunately, in the state of Missouri, we, as a public entity, are not allowed to give bonuses like that. And our surrounding states do. So.
Okay, that's all I have. I agree with Commissioner Lawson. I wish we can give our employees more. I think they all deserve it, and some deserve even much more than more. But to me, right now, until that salary survey is done, I think just across the board cost of living, the more we can do, I think is better. But like I say, it's got to come from somewhere. We got to figure that out, and I understand that. And I don't know what my other colleagues think about that. I could be way off base, and they may say, hey, no, you're making promises you can't cash.
The largest amount of money we will be looking for is in the general fund.
Right.
The general fund is about $250,000. So then we may want to have some discussions about some of the things that are in the general fund. I'm thinking one thing comes to mind in particular is, a certain dollar level that would help offset that.
Yeah.
But we need to have some conversations about that. I need to think through that a little bit more on
Okay.
what our options are.
Thank you.
But the other funds are not as great, coming up with an additional 1% as the general fund. So,
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. So much to use here. Well, I will first start off by saying I have an appointment with the real world at 1:30, so I am
Okay.
going to leave
We're
after
almost
these
done.
comments. And I won't stay for the rest of it because I got to go. But I will say, in the real world that I deal with, I've got an organization that has multiple different departments, has grown from about 30 to 55 in the last 6 years. We got these problems all over the place that we are trying to fix because we have people who will hop from department to department because of how they are funded.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to say, we got to do a study. Otherwise, it's just going to continue. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts because I see it every single day. Pass that for a moment. Getting over to the idea of raising that base. Hey, I'd love to pay everybody anything, right? I will point out, though, two things. We did this for the sheriff's department to make them closer to market. They did not fill all their vacancies, and now they have a compression issue that we are going to solve this year. So as we raise that base, we will then have to solve a compression issue down the line. Plus, how to pay for it over time. I would just say, as one of the slides I'm going to miss, but I saw was in there, was a slide you've shown before, Administrator, which basically says, as we increase that expenditure without the corresponding revenue, we will eat our reserve up, which means there is less carryover for the following year. So that is not unlimited. And I just want to suggest that whatever we do this year just creates the base of next year. That being said, I will now, as everyone's bringing a can for some reason, I'll bring mine. And I'll just go back to the can I brought last week and that I've intimated here. I do not believe that we can continue to rely on the number of vacant positions that will remain vacant and fully fund them, because it creates dead money. And I understand the mentality of, hey, if you get rid of the vacant position, it's harder to come back. But I would also note, we are actually talking about adding a couple of positions, at least one, I think two this year,
Actually,
right?
two, a painter and an engineer.
Right, so I would just note that if the need is justified, I don't see any reason not to consider it. But it just seems to me, if year over year we have positions that are not being filled over and above what the normal churn would be, because I recognize people go out, people come in for any number of reasons. But when we set aside a number that is so high that at the end of the day, we simply just kind of, we didn't fill it, so we'll just stick that into carryover and it comes back next year. That hides so many things that it is then hard, in my opinion, than to resolve these issues that we're talking about here. And so, you know, I'm not, to me, that is, if you want to find a place to find money, that's where you find money. I don't want to hurt the organization in that conversation long-term, but I also have to ask the question, do we have to have, or if these are consistently vacant, in the end, do we have to have them, or is the market not there to fill it? Therefore, we either have to do more with less, or we flip that over to a more contractual relationship. It's just staring me in the face, and I cannot. It's my bone, and this dog is gnawing on that bone.
I certainly understand. So, you know, there's a couple of things, and we really didn't talk about it last week, the general fund, but, so the turnover year-to-date rate for the county as a whole is 14%. Now, I will tell you that SHRM, which is, you know, the state of Human Resource Management, said you should aim for a 10% turnover. So we're not that high above really what would be industry business standard. Now, you know, lately companies have been closer to 20%, but we were 14%. Government average in 2022 was 20%, right? So I would say while we have turnover, it's, you know, I think we're in a better position. Our turnover rate is not as great as what they've been seeing on a national average.
Right.
So that's great news for us. But the problem that we have is when we turnover, but can you fill it? And that's where we're having difficulty for, I think, multiple reasons. You know, you talked about we've got to stop people from going from one department to another because while it's the same job title and maybe similar work, you know, but they're making 75 cents more an hour, and I get it. They've got to put food on their table, a roof over their head for their families. But the problem is that also costs the county money because they're still in a new job. So now we have training costs for those individuals. And so, you know, we're losing even more because of that. So I agree with you, that has got to stop. Yes, how we budget with regard to the vacancies. Now, some of the departments they have been challenged because we've had a couple of the job titles have been vacant since I've been here. We've not been able to fill them. So the question is, if we can't fill them, you know, is our service level not up to where we want it to be? And so we need to do something to fill it. Or if the service level is okay, then do we really need to keep funding for that position?
Right.
Or is it somewhere in between, and can we do something with technology,
Right.
you know, that helps fill that gap to boost the the
Well,
expectation.
And to me, it's that additional trade-off of if we want to provide relief to the rest of the organization,
Right.
is that an okay trade-off to say, I'm gonna remove that position that I'm either having, it's taken me years to fill it, and I'm still not filling it, or do I want to reinvest it to those that are not, who are still here with the hope that that is what helps keep them here, so that I don't create a new hole to fill?
Right.
And I don't know the answer to that, but to me,
You're
those are
absolutely
the
right, because it
trade-offs.
will vary from position and from jobs.
Yeah.
Right? So if you say, well, team, let's see, what if we don't fill this one? Who can absorb what are those responsibilities? And does that put too much stress
Right.
on our existing employees? So even though we might be able to raise their salary, sometimes if it's not fun to come to work anymore and it's too stressful, I'm going to go someplace else.
Right.
So it's finding that balance.
Yeah, and again, I think I said it last week, if that is not something that's solved in
Yeah.
this budget,
Yeah.
I can live with that, but to me, that is the longer-term
I agree.
discussion of how do you right-size an organization to have the positions that you need filled, being fair to those that are here, while still delivering what our residents expect. And I don't necessarily want that job to figure it out, but that number just keeps staring at me.
Yeah.
And,
And as
it's
we
gotta be
grow
resolved.
as a county and our citizens have other expectations from us.
Sure.
We've got to also then look at that in the horizon also, and how do we meet that need?
Yeah, got it. I have to leave, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
A couple of things I'd like to say, then go to Commissioner Johnson. One is that it was not that long ago, some years ago, that I was in Indiana. One of the things they did, and this is hardly transferable across the board, but they were doing their road crews. And what it amounted to was, if the road crew is able to come in under budget and still get the job done, obviously, in an acceptable way, that shortfall, that, I should say surplus, was divided between going back into general fund and between those workers who participate. There's a very, that's is full of tricky.
Well, and certainly, so you're talking about doing that from an internal perspective, which I think would be great. Again, it's rewarding employees for a job well done, on time, on budget, and maybe early. We will not be able to do that
We'd have to work around the
statute.
bonus issue, yeah.
And now I've seen it written, and it's been a while out of Missouri, but, you do that a lot with contractors, right? So if we are hiring a third party to come in and do our road program, or, to do all the asphalt, if they come in under budget, on time, you see that a lot with construction projects, then there'll sort of be, sort of an incentive bonus. And I don't know if that's allowed under Missouri. No, okay.
I don't think it
So
is.
some things we are challenged with by state statute.
Now, if there's a way, and I say that because, first off, that doesn't apply across the board, because you can't apply that to somebody who is, say, working in a clerical position nearly as easily. It's not easily measurable. I'm just saying that as another avenue, and you're right, we are not allowed to give bonuses in government in the state. Whether there would be another way to apply that, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there as another way to say that might be something that would be
We
at
can
least food for thought.
Yeah, we can explore that option. Again, former life, former state, different states, we would have the ability, if we were doing a major project. So you mentioned, clerical stuff. So when we, in my prior, did a website, and it involved, representatives from all departments, and did we get it done on time? We actually got to recognize them because they were doing something completely out of their normal scope of their job. They were on like your SB, 190 committee. There are things that we ask employees to do that, to be part of that. And so you recognize that. We have to find other ways to recognize employees because we can't do it from a monetary standpoint.
And like I said, I just want to mainly throw that out there as just an option that I don't think transfers into this situation directly. Maybe it'll spur another thought. The other thing is, I do, and I since he is no longer here to gnaw on that particular bone, I will do it just a little bit. And that is, if we have been able to do without a position for a number of years, I think it makes an open question, is that necessary? I'm not, the answer is not universally yes or universally no. That takes a degree of analysis. And to tell you the truth, if you got, say, 10 positions that are not filled, can we eliminate 5 and keep 5 so that we have the growth? So I mean, I don't have an answer, and I don't even have a direction to give you. I'm just saying, that's kind of where my logic takes me to an extent.
We don't disagree. So the park fund right now, we have 5 vacancies. I don't know that we've had 5 vacancies all season long, all year long. We were able to do it, and I don't think we had very many complaints about the conditions of our parks or services that any of our citizens received from our park staff. Part of that, the weather played into with it, right? If it rained all the time, then, then mowing might have been a bigger challenge for us. So sometimes things work in our favor that we are able to do that, short-staffed. We're going to talk next week about the highway budget. And so we know we've gotten concerns by commission, by residents about our road maintenance program. And that is a department that we have vacancies in and have had vacant and not been able to fill some of those entry-level positions since I've been here. And so there, I would tell you that those vacancy positions are hurting us in our services that we provide to our citizens. So they have to be looked on a case-by-case basis.
And the other part of it is, if you've got X number of vacancies and we cut them in half, we can always restore them as the need is there. I realize that. I don't.
I'm going to quote you on that.
Uh-oh.
Right, because I will tell you, what I find is once you cut positions, especially non-public safety positions, they are very difficult to get back in the budget. They just are. But again, if it's a position that we can recalibrate and use those funds appropriately, then I'm all for that and will support that. But I am not here to say, well, we haven't been able to fill it. We really need it, but we haven't filled it, so let's just cut it next year, because I will say the challenge will be getting that position back in the budget.
Well, even at that, you could put I hate to say this, but it was done in the state budget, and that is, if you want to retain a line item, you fund it at $1, and then it's still in the line item, and you can go back. But I realize there are a lot of differences between, and believe me, I've seen fair amount of differences between the way they operate the state and the way we operate the county, to know that there's a decent amount that is transferable, but there's also a pretty substantial amount that is not. So I'm just basically throwing ideas out there and see if any of them have any merit.
I appreciate that. So I have done 30 budgets.
Yeah, your experience
annual
is much
budgets,
broader
right?
than mine.
And I will say, my philosophy on budget and gets to the departments is, we are not the federal government. So if you're under budget, that's great. It does not mean I am going to cut your budget next year. I prefer if you don't need it, fine. But the federal government status has always been, I got to spend every dollar in my budget, because if I don't, they're going to cut it next year. We don't operate that way, and we encourage, and that's not how we do business. But you're right, there are all different ways in which a budget is utilized.
And I'm just trying to, because I know that your experience is much broader than mine, and everything I say is something that you've probably taken around the horn more than once. But at least it's, like I said, I'm just trying to contribute to the breadth of the
Absolutely.
conversation.
We're always looking at, new and innovative ways we can make it work.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, unfortunately, my colleague, Commissioner Wagner, had to leave. I actually wanted to respond to what he had to say along these same conversations that we're having now in regards to budgeted vacancies. And I understand what he's saying. When you see this on paper, you see this year after year, budgeted vacancies, and we're counting on this money from budgeted vacancies. On paper, that might look kind of odd, and well, we just don't need it. We can fix that. However, having been on that side for 30-plus years, I understand the reality of how this works. And I've been on that side in a couple different cities, and everywhere I've been, there's always, and will always be vacancies. Budget vacancies. And the problem you have if you eliminate those, and let's just use round numbers, let's say we have 100 budget positions and 5 of those are vacant. So we have 95 employees. We say, we're going to cut those 5 positions. What we've done is now we have 90 employees with 5 vacancies, because we're always going to have those vacancies. And so no matter if we cut those vacancies, there's still going to be vacancies eventually. That's just how it works. That's just the nature of the beast and the complexity of hiring and retention, that kind of stuff in the public sector, is there will always be a certain amount of vacancies. And so if we take those vacancies away, we're actually going to end up taking budgeted employees away that are actually working for us. Because, like I said, that vacancy will move. Instead of having 95 budgeted or 100 budgeted and actually 95 at work, if we bust that down to 95, we'll have 95 budgeted and actually 90 at work. If we bust that down another 5, we'll have 85 who are actually at work, another 5 up to 90 that are budget vacancies. That's just how it works. That's the nature of the beast, and you guys know that. Just know that I know that. I will be 100% ever cutting any budgeted vacancies unless you guys tell me we need to cut budget. We don't need these positions anymore. Because I understand that's not how it works. It's just not how it works. We cut a budget vacancy. We are cutting a position because we're always going to have that budget vacancy. We will always have that. It eventually roll over to we'll have budget vacancy. That's just how it works in government. No matter how hard we try, we can't keep 100% of our budget positions filled. And so we just have to live in that arena. So I will never, ever propose or vote in favor of cutting any budgeted vacancies unless you tell me we don't need it anymore.
I'm sorry, no, I don't have anything to add
Okay.
to that.
Well,
I was just going to say, I see no one else
More
seeking
comments?
recognition, so please proceed.
I have a couple more slides on the park fund, and it kind of goes along, again, a little bit, visioning long-term. So again, this is the park fund balance report. So you see here the beginning balance of 2.9. That's, the carryover, the reserves, whatever you want to call it. Operating revenues are 4.9, operating expenditures are 6.9, so that has expenditures exceeding revenues of a little over $2 million, which again, fund balance, that leaves us $876,000. That's 13% of expenditures. But again, looking at our trend analysis, which we've all been talking about, some of those areas and vacancies, beginning balance is the same at 2.9, operating revenue doesn't change, but our operating expenditures do for various reasons. And so when we look at trend analysis, then that still has our expenditures over operating revenues, but only of about $782,000. So that would bring the fund balance down to $2.1 million, and that leaves us at a 37% fund balance. And so probably reality is by the end of 2023, we'll be somewhere in between. But we also, as we continue to talk about with every fund and every budget, and a lot of your discussion here today, we don't make budget decisions just for this minute, this day, this week, this year, but we want to look forward-looking. Now this, I don't want anybody to get really scared about this particular one. Normally I would not bring you, I'm never going to bring you a budget that has this kind of expenditures over revenues without a fund balance like we normally do. But this is simply forecasting. And so, but I want to draw attention to a couple things that you all have already talked about today. So again, 2024 proposed budget, you'll see that as we just talked about, looking at our trend analysis, we believe that we'll end fund balance at $2.1 million. And so our expenditures are going to be over our revenues if on trend analysis by about the $780,000. But then we're looking forward, right? So we're projecting revenues going forward, and we're projecting expenditures going forward. And you see that that gap starts getting larger, and this based on trend. And so you see the fund balance go from 2.1 to 1.2 to in 2026, 358,000. In 2027, we're in the negative, no fund balance, a negative of 640. Now, we will never bring a budget to you that looks that way. But I want to draw your attention to the assumptions. So on the expenditures, you see that we've used a consistency across all our funds as we look at forecasting. So wages and benefits will go up about 3%, health insurance goes up 7%, and contractual commodities 3%. But if you look at the revenue side, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, yes, we get a little bit from sales tax, and we're projecting sales tax going up 5%. Property tax goes up 3%. But the fees, the leases, and the miscellaneous are all revenues that come specifically from parks, that is, self-supporting parks. And so the problem with this, if you see, again, as we talked about, is, 82% of revenue comes from fees and leases. And so if our leases, our revenue from our leases and our fees do not keep pace with what our expenditures are going to be, then yes, we are not going to be self-sustaining in the parks. And so I say that because back to our discussion about, well, what do we do with pontoon boats? How many should we have? What's it cost us to operate those? What does it cost? What's the revenue coming in? What should the fees be to lease those? And so, we as staff must do our due diligence to come forward to you when we are recommending to you fee changes, lease changes, tying that to what is our operating cost, because if we don't keep pace with our expenditures, then we're either going to have to be supplementing it from other revenues, from the general sales tax, or we're going to have to raise fees, or we'll have to deal with the expenditures. So this is just taking trend line, but what it does demonstrate to us is how important it is that our revenues coming in from park operations keeps pace with our operating costs for the parks. And that is all we have on the park fund. Great discussion, thank you very much. Just kind of to touch base again, next steps on the budget is next Wednesday at 10 o'clock. We will be in here with the assessor's office, then followed by Road and Bridge and their budget, and then talking about the 5-year CIP. And part of Road and Bridge will also be talking about the road maintenance program and specifically the 5-year road maintenance program.
Are there any questions or comments before we put a pin in this?
You got a question?
No,
Oh.
I'm sorry that we had to kind of run you through the ringer. That wasn't my intention.
It's fine. It's a great discussion, and, our employees are very important to us. They are, I say this, and I'll do respect to elected officials over my 30 years. Our employees have more day-to-day contact with our constituents than you do. And so we value them. They are the face of the county out in the field providing these services. And so we value what they do. Our citizens value what they do, and we need to be able to share that and reward them for what they do.
Okay. There's nothing further. We are adjourned.
Thank you.